Yes, and they would even add in the pink.
Spiffing in the pink.
Kabisha. Not spiffing in the pink, Baba. Two are separate. Spiffing is one, and the pink is another. It's not spiffing in the pink. You're going to say in the pink spiffing. That's the rate you're going.
You're spiffing pink.
Yay.
Karibuni katika kipindi cha leo. Wale wanaojumuika nasi kwa wakati huu. What is it?
Wakati huu.
Wakati. Fursa. No, what the fuck? All of them combined.
I remember.
So we'll have a couple of conversations today. The debt conversation is still big. Is Kenya in a debt crisis? That is what a group of civil society organizations that have come together under the Okoa Uchumi Coalition have basically put forth as a question. Are we hurtling towards a serious debt crisis in the country, and what can be done about this? So we'll have a conversation with about that. And then we'll also discuss the economic recovery for counties. The Council of Governors came up with this, what they call a blueprint, on how counties can then re-engineer and recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we'll also look at other countries around Africa. Zambia is in trouble because they have passed a deadline for paying some debt. We'll get to understand about that. COVID-19 is no joke. It's still ravaging the country. The challenge is about telling people the COVID-19 story. It's told all the time. In fact, yesterday and today, there's been a story about John Budhia, by John Budhia. Budhia is a former Nation quality editor and is currently a consulting editor with The Nation. He's been telling his own story and his journey with COVID-19. And he says, my friend, my body felt like it was no longer mine. By his own words. Not a good feeling to have. But anyway, what are the new figures around the country and around the world?
Right, so in Kenya, yesterday, 756 new cases over the last 24 hours, yesterday, from 4,316 samples. So we push Kenya's numbers now to 63,244 from a total of 796,000 cases so far, or rather samples having been taken in the country, right? So just under 800,000 samples or tests having been done in the country. And this is what we see now. Kenya's caseload at 63,244. Looking at the globe, 51,239,330. The United States standing out here again at almost now 10.5 million. We're seeing huge numbers still coming out of the US. The day before, over 100,000 cases found in 24 hours. If we look at what happened now yesterday in terms of what was recorded, 125,000, so 21,000 cases more than the day before, 125,689. Although Joe Biden is still not in the seat, as it were, he's pulled up his sleeves, is what is being reported by a lot of media right now. And he was saying that as of yesterday, him and his team were going to really work on the COVID response. Not surprisingly, we also see that Pfizer has now said the new vaccine that they have been working on now has 90% efficacy from tests that have been done. Pfizer said they announced this as soon as they found out. And so they're still working on this in terms of now seeing when this will then be made available for the public.
90% efficacy. About 1 million, or is it 10 million? Or is it 100 million?
100 million tests so far.
100 million tests.
Samples, vaccine shots, as it were. So, waiting to see.
They have produced 100 million. Or they're hoping to produce.
So there was something that I saw yesterday. It's something like...
and by which period of time?
In the range of millions, they already had... They hope to have a 1.3 billion doses next year. The company said that they expect to supply up to 50 million vaccines doses globally this year alone.
This is where information, because Some of the media houses have reported 90 million by the end of the year. But then questions arise. Indeed, if indeed this vaccine works, because these are the initial reports that we are getting, how long does the effect last?
This is another question that's being asked.
Yes, because it's raising questions. And the question that is also being asked, okay, does it work among the elderly? Which age group is it most effective in? And when you talk, then there's the all-important question when it comes to countries like ours that are suffering, third world, cash-strapped. Will we be able to afford it? Because we seem to depend very much on what the WHO is able to negotiate on our behalf and set a ceiling on what it is that it's likely to cost. It is excellent news. It is good news. And it is the first time that such a thing has happened in such a short time for such a result to actually come out. And with a sort of positivity, because compared to, say, the flu vaccine only guarantees you 50%. Yes, efficacy. So this is not good. This is extremely good.
90% therefore is really,
It's almost
It's
perfect.
very, 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 very good
So,
indeed.
I mean,
is this company part of the Gavi, the Alliance for Vaccine?
No. But remember, with COVID, new alliances were formed. And one of the things that has marked the development and the search for the appropriate vaccine has been just the collaborative effort that had previously not been seen. People who manufacture it, people who research on it, people have pulled their heads together. And that is why, for the first time, from start to end, we are seeing these results in such a short time. It's never happened before.
sure, but they did partner with this German company. And remember, from the very beginning, when we heard Angela Merkel specifically talk about the fact that she had heard from experts that there could be a vaccine that they could come up with later. So Pfizer, in the early days, partnered with BioNTech, and they're the ones who've been able to then come up with this. So a lot of people have been saying that Pfizer did this standalone production,
No,
but they did
it's
not.
It's not.
They were not part of the Gavian group for this. However, they did come together with this German company to be able to do this.
What we will find is that, you see, there are very many pharmaceutical companies who are at various stages of development of the vaccine. And once there is a breakthrough, you will find other breakthroughs as well, because the demand for the vaccine outstrips the capacity of all these pharmaceutical companies to actually supply what is needed.
Yeah.
But then, for those of us in Africa, let's suspend our joy.
Yeah,
It's not as though we're going to get the vaccine tomorrow. No. There are some production agreements that the pharmaceutical companies have with countries like those in Europe, America, which means that even as they produce these, the people who are likely to get them first will be these countries. And then we will be considered later. So the earliest we can think of getting the vaccine is next year.
Even next year is a bit ambitious, I think. In my thinking, by the time we get other companies then coming up, look, this one is only saying that it will be able to do 50 million doses, right, by the end of this year. And then let's say 1.3 billion doses next year. The question that will also come up with the affordability of it. Because by the time we are saying that you go into a health facility in any part of the country and you're given this COVID-19 shot, by the time we're able to do that, I don't even see it before 2022.
Well, I really have no claim to understanding when it will be produced. I can only regurgitate what I have read and what I have heard. The BBC were of the same opinion as the article that we see by John Mushangi in the Star, and they're saying the earliest is next year. But no one says when. Beginning of the year, middle of the year,
Or
end of
end
the year.
year.
No, they just say earliest.
Earliest, right?
Next year, yes.
Earliest for it to be available to African
As
countries.
to African countries, yes.
Yeah, but not necessarily affordable.
What has happened right now, no. Affordable, they're hoping that the WHO will be able to negotiate something on their behalf. What has happened right now is that applications have been made for this particular vaccine to be used for emergency cases.
Yeah.
That is what has happened. So one is awaiting the results, because you apply and you wait.
You wait
to be
for
given,
Nini.
yes, to be given permission to actually use it.
Okay, I'm just going by, going by how we are able to acquire PPEs and testing kits from the global market that is not closed, that's not, just restricted to few pharmaceutical companies, and how our capacity to get testing kits my friend. Our capacity.
Well,
to
when we
vaccines.
get PPEs, we what we do is we store them in the KEMSA go downs, awaiting investigations to be completed.
And then the testing kits we don't get.
Somehow other people are able to get them, but for some strange reason, we seem to be unable to get them on time.
Yeah.
Or at all,
But we don't stop there. Even the ones which are donated,
We managed to steal
we
them
still
and then
manage
sell
to
them
ensure
to
that
other...
they don't get to the people who actually need them. So this is a unique situation that we find ourselves in.
Now imagine the vaccine.
I can imagine the vaccine. In fact, it doesn't strain the imagination. In fact, you don't even need to think very hard.
Go as far as you can, actually. It could probably happen.
Because with
Your
this,
imagination.
you almost get the impression that there are people who already started planning and plotting.
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
It's gonna be a long one. It's gonna be a long one. And the crackdown is still ongoing in the country.
Yes.
And the warnings are still there, loud.
Wear a mask, However, matatus are full to the brim.
Maintain social distance.
Social distance is not being maintained within public transport vehicles. That's not happening. The queues towards these public transport vehicles either. Neither are those being regarded. But outside you must wear a mask. And we have the police on the streets day and night making sure that everybody is doing what they ought to do to stop the spread of COVID-19.
And the hospital capacity is still an issue.
It's still an issue,
We're
and
still
unfortunately
here.
now we are seeing medics being affected on a much higher scale than we had seen previously. More and more medical staff are coming down with COVID. The stories that we are hearing also of those who've been infected and what they are going through in terms of symptoms is not encouraging at all. More and more people getting COVID-19, but then suffering more from the symptoms, and then unfortunately driving closer home where more people are succumbing. So that's what we are seeing. It's not good. The picture is not good at all. If we're looking at 1,130 deaths, there were 29 deaths yesterday in the morning. 19 deaths yesterday, because yesterday there were 1,111 the day before, and now Kenya is at 1,130. We also saw that students in a boys' school yesterday, out of the 60 Form 4 students, 56 walked out and decided they were going home. I will give you details of that story later. But decided that they were going home because, number one, they were fearful that they could contract COVID. Number two, they felt like the school administration was not doing enough to make sure that they were protected.
Wow.
So they've decided they will go home.
Tell us
Exams are
about that.
notwithstanding.
It's 6:15. Let's take a break now, see what's happening in terms of the weather, and then we look at the newspaper headlines this morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life. 24/7, around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM.
It has been a tough year for your business, hasn't it? But you hung in there. You pressed on. You persevered. And now it's time to rise up. It's time to get ready, to get going, to get selling. And Google is here to help you rise up. Get free training and tools to help your businesses adapt and grow online. Visit g.co/Grow Africa to start now.
COVID-19 imeimpact lives za wase wengi sana. Watu wame lose jobs, kutoka mama mboga, business owner next door, neighbor amefungiwa hao na landlord. Pesa imekuwa mteja, haipatikani hata ya kuweka chakula kwenye meza. Ili kujenga jirani, unaweza toa suu moja, 100 bob only, na hii inaweza badilisha maisha ya Wakenya wengi sana. Na usisahau kuungana na sisi for the Jenga Jirani Charity Festival 7th and 8th of November on KTN Home, na pia itakuwa online on www.jengajirani.org. See you then, ili tujenge jirani and show some love.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise.
Okay,
You're
showers
listening
here and
to
there in Nairobi this
Spice
morning,
FM.
17 degrees at the moment. Highs of 23 and lows of 16, and a chance of this rain continuing for some time. It's 14 degrees and partly cloudy in Nakuru. 24 the high and lows of 14. Mostly cloudy conditions in Nyeri at 14. We'll see highs of 23 and lows of 13. It's 13 degrees and clear skies in Eldoret this morning. As the sun comes up, it'll go to a high of 22 and lows of 13. It's mostly cloudy in Kisumu at 20. Highs of 28 and lows of 19. Mostly cloudy conditions in Kakamega this morning as well, giving chance of rain coming later with highs of 27 and lows of 15. Rain showers in Mombasa this morning. We'll see highs of 27 and lows of 24. It's mostly cloudy in Malindi at 20, highs of 29 and lows of 17. Out of Kenya into Kampala now, it's 17 degrees. Raining this morning, we've got highs of 25 and lows of 17. Dar es Salaam experiencing light rain this morning as well, 23 at the moment. That will be the low for today, going to highs of 29. Rain showers in Johannesburg at 18 degrees, highs of 21 and lows of 13. And in Lagos, it's also raining at 26. We'll go to high of 31 and lows of 25. It's raining in Kinshasa as well at 22. The high will be 32 and lows of 22. Looking to Beijing going east, and it's sunny all through going into the afternoon at 14. They'll go to a high of 17 and come down to a cold low of 1. Paris, France is clear at 12, going to highs of 15 and lows of 10. And it's raining in London at 14 degrees, going to highs of 15 and lows of 10 as well. And finally, for now, Monday night in New York at 19 degrees. Going into Tuesday, we'll see highs of 22 and lows of 15.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.
19 minutes after 6. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. Who is online?
Hello, Caleb. Good morning. And from Kisumu, Kibos, Jeffrey Machama. Good morning to you. Susan Kanyoko. Your name is almost like mine. Kabondo Kapsipo. Well tuned in.
What?
Good morning.
Your name is Susan.
Kanyoko. Oko.
Oh, okay.
My name is not Susan.
Right. So watch what I say.
Yes. So good morning to Eric, Sisi, and Ndu from Susan. Laban Tanui Captail. Good morning from Koryot, Nandi County. Good morning. I'd love to go to Nandi one day and see what it's all about. That whole area.
Okay.
Bade Ashley's tuned in from Macha. And Mike Kiburo, good morning. And is spiced in Nyeri. Oh, you need it. It's a bit cold this morning in Nyeri. Tuned in from Nakuru is Charity Minor. And Lauren says, good morning all and a good day ahead. A good day to you too. Welcome everybody to the Situation Room this morning.
Karibuni Kilamutu. Siti Muga, today's proverb.
Hallelujah.
Wow.
Amen.
Okay.
Gold should be sold to the one who knows the value of it.
Okay. And from whom should it be stolen?
That's another proverb. This particular proverb,
It's about selling.
they're just selling it.
Okay.
Origins here have been suspended. Just know that the gold exists and that you only sell it to those who know the value of it.
Bas.
And value here, please expand your meaning of it.
Okay.
You may like the glitter, you may actually know the monetary value, or just fill in the blanks there.
Jijazie.
Please.
Jijazie.
Yes.
Okay. So let's look at the headlines in the papers this morning. There's a race to save the BBI.
No.
And Raila has yielded to Ruto's BBI demands. Those are the two headlines, the Nation and the Standard. Is there a BBI headline in the Star?
Yes. Raila makes U-turn on BBI amendments.
Okay.
But you know, this is where the issue I always have with our headlines and our reporting comes in. It has been made a Ruto affair, and yet the person who was very eloquent about these things was Musalia Mudavadi.
Which things?
Or the issue of the amendments and what should be considered. It's not that the deputy had nothing to say, but he is not the only one who had something to say on this matter. Yes. But it has now been made by us in the media. We have now taken it back to the battle between Raila
It's Raila and versus
yes.
Ruto.
What is it that he's supposed to have said or done? Because when I think of U-turn, that means now you're turning and going in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Right? So what is it that has said and done that has turned him in the opposite direction as per where he was a week ago?
It's the issue of whether the thing can be debated, reopened for debate.
Remember the utterances that were attributed to certain members of the parties that supported the BBI? Categorical, never.
This one is not
Forget,
going anywhere.
the ship sailed. The train is on the track, it's going. You are too late. Those were the sentiments.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm dramatizing it, but those are the sentiments.
Yeah.
And now we can discuss.
Now we are discussing.
You know, when it comes to political utterances, one must always take them with a pinch of salt. Always. Especially when they seem very brazen and very bold and very categorical and definitive. Pause and take it with a huge pinch of salt, because political lingo, that is a negotiation that has begun.
That's what it is.
It's a negotiation. It has begun. And this one, you can call it, the other one, you can call it a song, and you can say this is a response to the song, an invitation for the dance. Okay? Previously, it was one person dancing. The other person said, no, I think this tune is inadequate. Let me add my tune so that this song can become more palatable so that we can dance. Now the stage is being set for the dance to begin.
This is it.
Yes.
But don't you think that this is unfortunate? Because this should have happened earlier, much earlier. All this, for example, now we are seeing. Yesterday, Raila was meeting with the pastoralists group. This is the frontier counties and the parliamentary group from that region. And they had met last week and they had issued their statement. And now yesterday they were meeting with the ODM leader. And there's what the ODM leader said. Yeah. Some of the issues that have been raised here are actually issues that can be considered and should be considered in a conversation going forward. In fact, form a team and meet with the BBI task force technical team to thrash out these issues. This could have happened much earlier in the form of, instead of saying let's go around with rallies and saying this is what we're going to do, should have had these focus group meetings.
Sometimes I wonder, Eric, who is to tell what the political thinking is on these issues? The guiding principle that leads politicians to do the things they do when they do them. We were talking here about these rallies, and then we had Mashujaa Day, and those were mini rallies all over the country, in every county. And you're asking yourself, and we ask the question, surely, was this necessary? We know we have COVID now. Look at the numbers and look at the numbers of people who are dying. You know, in this country now, we're not talking about infections alone. We're talking about people dying. Record numbers. And they're increasing. So, what is it that we can say definitively is the thinking behind politicians when they make some of these decisions that they make?
Selfishness is the top of mind.
Is the underlying the thinking.
Yes.
So I don't think there's any consideration for the rest of the country at that point. It's really about you, how you can align yourself, or what favors you would then get moving forward. It really doesn't take the Kenyan into consideration.
I'm actually making reference to that time when the first BBI report was launched at Bomas. The next thing that should have happened, and I said it at that point, is bring people together now, have a formal review of the report. All these people who are talking now would have presented their views formally.
But it wouldn't have stopped them from raising other issues again. Remember, all these people we're talking about here are politicians.
True.
All of them. And the backdrop of our discussions is not just the BBI, it's the BBI in 2022. Okay? So, where I think we're in agreement is that COVID and the health, welfare of the citizenry takes second, third, fourth, fifth place. It's not a consideration. When they look at their calendar and they look at the list of their priorities, it's not.
No,
But
even this BBI, what is important is not really in a consideration. It is what matters to political leaders. That's what is important. For example, now we're talking about certain groups coming and saying, look, we could have included this. I am sure if we went into the records, we will find a place where pastoralists had raised issue with the equalization fund. If it had been a formal meeting, like what happened in Bomas, form committees, go and look for areas that are standing out as sticking points, thrash them out. Then you come out of that, not with a committee then bringing a report or a task force giving you a report, but an entire group of people coming out with a report. like what happened in the bombers. So yes, it was divisive, but there was a lot of conversation that was happening. Some of these issues would have come out clearly that, look, when you're today, governors are meeting in Naivasha, and President and Raila are going to be addressing them. The governors are raising the issue of a proposal on gender, whether there should be gender balance in the ticket for governor and deputy governor, whether MCAs can also be part of the governor's cabinet that's joining the CEC. These conversations could have happened at some point in another way. Now we just have one happening in Naivasha 2 weeks ago, another one happening in Naivasha today, another conversation happening in Nairobi yesterday, other conversations happening elsewhere. We have seen the County Assemblies Forum has demanded its own conversation.
Remember, we are applying what you call normal everyday logic to a political situation. It doesn't apply. It doesn't, because if that logic were to have applied, or had it been considered even in decision making, everything that you're saying would have happened, and they would have considered it. But I can't even claim to understand what is happening behind the scenes that is deciding these and what the long-term game is. It's like you get a peek preview, and even then it's not the whole picture.
Right.
Yeah, you're only seeing just a side of the stage where they've drawn, say, the curtains. But what is behind the curtains, you actually can't see.
no idea.
See.
Yes, but as things move along, you get an impression also, this is what they were dealing with all along. What is certain is this. Politicians will adhere to pressure. There has been enough noise on this matter about change and the need for dialogue, and I am seeing there has been now a response. And there are those who would argue they anticipated this and put themselves in that position so that there could be that pushback, and then they can be seen as people who are reasonable and who are willing to consider the other view. And you see, that's where Eric's argument comes in, and it fails, should I call it, the political bar talk test. Politicians don't reason the way we are reasoning now. Their logic is completely different. The guiding principles behind their logic is completely, yes, and it's very different.
Their game is different.
It's very, very different.
It's not about you. Whereby here you're thinking about for the betterment of the country, for the people. No. It's about them. That's the guiding principle.
All right, John is telling me we need to go to a break at 28 minutes past 6 o'clock. So let's take that break. Take a look at traffic and see what's happening on the roads, and then we can continue looking at other headlines. Good morning. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life. Spice FM. Spice up your life. Traffic.
Okay, so Mombasa Road, as it is already, is crazy, and it's bumper to bumper all the way from the SGR. Now, as you get towards Bellevue, there's some flooding that has taken place, so cars are going extremely slow. So today we have traffic all the way from the SGR. It's leading us all the way down through towards Bellevue, and then slowly more so towards Nyayo Stadium. Today, it already looks like it's going to be absolutely crazy. As you're approaching, you need to be very careful. Let's step out of the city for a moment. The situation towards Maimahiu, there is traffic for kilometers. Not quite sure what's causing that problem this morning. And this is outbound in that direction. We'll probably get information in a short while as to what's causing that. But if you're headed to that direction, know that you're not going to leave anytime soon, because it's bumper to bumper for a really long while. It's totally messy, and we know that there is a strike, but we'll give you that information as we find out more details. Okay, coming off Thika Road and getting into the CBD doesn't look too bad at the moment. However, on Kiambu Road, it's already a mishmash at about 6:30. We'll let you know more details as we go along. Talk to us about where you might be stuck or what you see. Spice FMKE on Twitter, or text us on 40127.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
All right, more headlines. Do you want to tell us about these nurses?
Okay, so nurses and they've invested in a hearse. Bondo nurses have defended their decision to buy a hearse, saying that they were using their savings to respond to a local need and not to make profit. Right. Okay. So on page 2 of the Standard today, this is the story that we see. It went crazy on social media yesterday. Despite criticism, Bondo medics say they want to cut down the cost on transporting their colleagues' bodies. For the past 2 days, nurses at Bondo Sub-County Hospital have received praise and criticism after buying a hearse. When an official from the County Department of Communication innocently shared a picture of the acting chief officer for health, Eunice Foyer, commissioning a hearse bought by the Bondo Nurses Welfare Association, they had no idea what reaction it would elicit. The caption of the post indicated that the nurses were celebrating the investment, a hearse, which they say they had acquired after years of saving. And boom, a debate erupted on social media with Kenyans discussing the irony of professionals in the business of saving lives choosing to invest in a hearse. Why invest in a hearse when their profession is about saving lives? Nurses should have ventured into a business that enhances life and not hearse business. I propose an ambulance, for example. One. Another one said, now they will need more corpses to maintain their business, which means saving lives will result in a reduction in earnings. Rogers Ocheng, resident, wondered if the nurses were foreseeing some good business. Does it mean that COVID-19 might lead to many deaths? So caught up with one of the nurses by the Standard yesterday, and they were still reeling from the shock of how their innocent idea could have been misunderstood. According to the association chairman, Dominic Omolo, the nurses began contributing money towards the initiative in 2017. They saw it as a way to ease the transportation problem of corpses.
So there's a need.
There was a need because there were not enough in the area.
There are no hearses in the area.
And they said, look, this is a business. However, you're in the business of saving lives.
How many ambulances are there?
In Bondo? It would be interesting to find out.
Because some of the reactions were, surely,
you could have bought an ambulance.
you guys are in the business of saving lives.
could have invested in an ambulance.
Even if they had set up a funeral home, in fact, the reaction would have been even more adverse.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
But in my mind, it is a much needed service and it is a growth industry.
Let's be honest.
Because if you're nurses, they would understand the rate at which people die better than most people. And even prior to COVID, the death rate has been there. Now, if you look at the elaborate manner in which people celebrate death, and I'm using the words carefully and deliberately, then you would know that it's a business in the making. If you leave the emotional aspects of this matter out, and if you don't consider the issue of taboo associated with profiting from death aside, it's a service that is required. And all that they have done is taken, in my opinion, a very good decision, a very wise business decision to ensure that they provide a service that is needed.
The only thing is that the only reason why there was this tint on it is that because they are nurses and they're in the business of saving and preserving life. That's where the irony lies in all of this.
I would argue that
because if you're going to hope that your business flourishes, right?
But I'm taking it a step further.
The only way it can flourish
people
is if
need
people
dignity
die.
even in death.
It's true, but City, it's perspectives.
Yes, and I'm preferring this perspective.
It is how people will view it. Like, for example, their leader is saying the investment is not for business. Our mission was to have a long-term solution to the problem of transporting bodies of our members for burials every time we are faced with the unfortunate scenario. We had to get a hearse to ferry the body of our colleague from Bondo to Kisii, and we spent up to 24,000 shillings. This is how we hatched the idea of buying our own hearse in order to cut down on costs as well as give our departed colleagues a decent send-off. The hearses that we have around are few and always booked, such that getting them sometimes becomes a challenge. That's why we decided to get one for ourselves.
Well, that is their logic, but I even don't see any need for an apology here. Not really. Because for the longest time, these tribal social associations that people have when they live in towns, the people from this area meeting to do this. For the longest time when I was growing up in Mombasa, I remember when one Mr. Sharif Nasir was still minister, an MP from Vita. One such association, when they were asked what they required, they said they needed a hearse and a bus, or a bus come hearse that would transport bodies, because people died as they would die, but they needed something that would assist them to transport people. indeed, yes, you're saying they are nurses, and so it looks like they are going to be promoting death. For heaven's sake, they look after people, and people die because they die. It's not for lack of effort on their parts.
Yeah.
Yes. But having said that, they should have foreseen this.
They should have foreseen the backlash.
Yes.
They should have.
I think the issue here is that it went public. And that going public then invites everybody else to start looking at them and scrutinizing. So you guys have come together and you decided the best investment you want to do, because this is not just about welfare. I mean, you're not dying every day. So the day that this house is not transporting one of your members or family or close relative, it's
Then it's
in
out for
business.
You know, if I were to...
Unless you're saying that this will only be not for profit. We are giving it to the community. It'll be serving the community. Anybody who requires it, just come, you'll fuel it, and then there'll be a little amount for service.
If I draw a parallel to something called tuitioning, in the days when I was a high school teacher, tuitioning was something you did. You conducted classes on a Saturday for the students, and that was that.
Yep.
It wasn't something you did to actually earn money. But I saw the evolution of it. When now, people who understood the business aspect of it were making even more money tuitioning than they were actually being paid, whether by the government or the institution they worked for. Okay? So these are early days yet. Let them weather this storm. People will accept this idea, and they will move on.
People will move on.
Yeah, they'll move on.
They'll accept and move on.
Yes.
Hey. Okay.
Everybody will be all right.
Do you remember the lady called Sarah Wairimu Cohen?
Yes.
The widow of a Dutch tycoon, Tom Cohen. Now she claims that he was murdered and dumped in a septic tank at their home while she was being held in custody. Remember? She's facing charges over the death of this man. In a petition challenging her prosecution over Cohen's murder, Sarah Wairimu is claiming that the businessman was murdered by people who are well known, but they are enjoying protection of officers from the DCI. My husband was murdered by people who wanted to grab 500 million shillings matrimonial home in Kitisuru. They had me arrested on the 28th of August, then colluded with investigators to implicate me after planting his body in a septic tank while I was in custody. Through the lawyer Philip Murgo, she's also contesting Cohen's will, which denied her opportunity to inherit his multi-million shilling estate. He stated that the purported will was subjected to expert analysis that concluded that will was a forgery. That case, it was big headline news for some time.
It was.
Then now it was overshadowed by other things, including COVID. We're back.
Remember, the gentleman who passed away was labeled as a tycoon and a billionaire.
Yep.
I never understood why. Because the nature of his business, unless he was manufacturing golf clubs and he was distributing them on the continent, I couldn't, maybe I don't understand this business well, but I couldn't see how that business of his could make him a billionaire, unless there were other businesses that are not revealed.
Maybe.
Because from day one,
Or inherited.
he was a tycoon, then he became a billionaire, then he essentially was painted as this super rich person.
He was a rich man.
And the reason why I bring this up, it was like to provide motive for accusing the wife of having killed him.
The house, just the house where he lived, is valued at 500 million shillings
Valued by whom?
by valuers.
By real estate valuers.
Have you actually heard this distinction that house? It's a statement that has been made.
No, it's the wife who said now that's how the
That's what
house
I'm
where
saying.
they live.
Listen, the will. This is the will.
The will.
The Dutch
contested
businessman,
will.
the contested will, the Dutch businessman bequeathed 50% of the matrimonial home to his sister, and the children remaining half, and the remaining half to her two children. He also bequeathed 100 million shillings cash in bank accounts to his sister, 50 million shillings to his brother, and the family business to his sister. We're already talking about 150 million shillings. We are talking about
I'm waiting for the billion.
a home which is 500 million. Hapo tuko wapi? 650.
Sure.
We just need to add 350 to make him a
That's it.
billionaire.
That's
we
it,
will
please.
get there. We will get there. We have not done the business. We haven't valued the business.
This is just
the sticks
the
and the
few
balls.
assets here.
The golf sticks and the balls and the bags, the stock that was left. We'll get there, my friend.
Does he own a golf
You
course?
chill.
Don't worry.
You know, There's a narrative here that, in my opinion, I cannot speak about what actually went on because I don't know. But the narrative here seems to point to giving a solid motive for this wife having killed him. That this guy was super rich and she wanted him dead because of the money. Remember, they even threw in the allegation that she had a boyfriend.
Yep.
Okay. All that was up in the air. Everything was up in the air. So questions about this person's activities, what he did, other people who knew him. But the first suspect, it stuck. It's like everything had to revolve around the wife. There may very well have been evidence, but surely, even as the case has progressed, have we heard anything that solidly points to her being directly behind this particular murder?
No.
Or is she just being tried in the court of public opinion?
As
will
the first
emerge.
suspect. All these will emerge as the investigations continue.
It will emerge.
Speaking of things that have emerged, it seems that the angst of one CS education, George Magoha, came out, and he takes a swipe at scholars, researchers over inaction on virus. So we've seen him in the media a couple of days ago, and how he addressed one of the officers within the Ministry of Health when he went on some excursion. But now he has faulted university professors and scholars for doing little on research and innovations in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Professor Magoha expressed disappointment at the little involvement of local scholars in finding basic solutions to the coronavirus challenges. Why, I quote, are you not researching and giving Kenyans information on COVID-19? Why can't someone even just research on why Kenyans are not wearing masks properly? And even and give a solution to that.
There's a job there for you,
He
CT.
paused, he goes on, and he said he faulted researchers for spending more time to prepare papers to publish in international journals and hoarding critical information that can be used at this time. I quote again, it is good to publish, but can you also give out quick findings and information that can help Kenyans now? Where are you? Why are we not hearing from you, even in vernacular? Kenya National Academy of Science Chairman Raphael Munavu called for speedy release of the COVID-19 research findings by local scientists. Do not wait for research publications. Share your output as quickly as possible, according to Professor Munavu.
You know, publications are based on findings, right? And for findings to be credible, there are certain things that have to be verified over a period of time. And that has to do with collating it, analyzing it, looking at it. Forget publishing. Just saying this is what we have found. And it's not as though it takes a day. The preparation just for beginning a project, my friend, takes just preparation alone, and then starting it. Now, it is either the good professor doesn't really understand the conduct of research and the details that are required in starting research, or he also doesn't want to understand, or he understands it and has decided to sensationalize this thing.
In theory, he would. He is a professor. I mean, he's a doctor. He's a doctor of surgery.
He is
for
a
crying
medical
out loud.
doctor, but he's not a professor of research.
He's not.
No, he's not.
No, but look, I'm not a professor of research, but you understand the basic concept where you understand that these findings and research are bound together.
Research has been going on for some time. The Kemri Wellcome Trust site in Kilifi has been conducting research. They are not in a position to start talking about what they found before they've actually found it and understood what it is they're looking at. It's not as though you test one person who's COVID positive and then you start talking about that one person. For it to make sense, a pattern has to emerge.
Okay, but he said even before the vials and the pages of research, he's even asked something here. And he said, why can't someone even just research on why Kenyans are not wearing masks properly and give a solution to this? Why?
You know, one of the principal methods of data collection is observation. You don't actually need to get permission from research ethic authorities to do that. You just need to observe. Kenyans don't wear masks because masks are not issued free. They cost. And since they cost, in terms of priorities of what people should have, many Kenyans will not consider it a priority at all.
That's very interesting that you have said that, because he goes on in this story, according to this story, he faulted universities and research institutions for citing lack of funds for not leading the way in finding innovative solutions to the country's problems. He termed as unwise the culture by some researchers and universities to wait for government funding to start research.
And as opposed to doing what exactly?
Going ahead and doing it.
With what exactly?
To find innovative ways.
The air up there.
most of the research funding that we have in this country are not government funding. It's sourced from outside.
No, find local.
You know,
Sources.
the government
Innovative.
the government actually in its budget allocates a certain portion of our GDP to research, and that is known
On paper, yes.
Yes, as to whether that money can actually be accessed. If we can't access
Allocation and disbursement are
different matters, we know what counties should get. Do they get it?
No.
Okay. So, what the professor is saying should not be watered down. It's a challenge for people who conduct research to be able to actually do what they can. But can he not also, as the minister, do what he ought to have been doing? These reports that we've been asking about schools, suitability for students to actually be able to conduct their business in a safe environment. Can he tell us what the ministry has done? That doesn't require research.
Can you tell us whether the report came out? October 31st came and passed. 365 days later, did the report actually come out?
Which report? So the things that directly fall under his purview.
So you should be researching why the Ministry of Education cannot release reports on time. Why are researchers in Kenya not doing this?
Why can't
It's
you
a
tell us the
challenge that you
suitability of
take up.
school for our learners? Why? Something like that.
So while we are on this journey of research, then we should also find out why it is that many schools don't have water sources, why it is that students are not being tested regularly. That's the journey we should take, isn't it?
And you should also tell us why 51 students walked out, leaving only 3 students in school after 2 students coughed and complained of chest pains. And they said, absolutely not. Here, we are not staying.
51 of them left.
Yesterday.
Okay. You'll tell us about that shortly.
Well,
Sugar and spice and everything nice, everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice FM, Malindi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
7. So, tell us about these students.
Right. So yesterday, Form 4 students at Kiptoim Mixed Secondary School in Baringo County stormed out of their school on Sunday, citing COVID-19 fears. And this was according to the principal. 51 students walked out, leaving only 3 students in the school. This is after 2 students complained of headaches and chest pains. Mogotio Sub-County Director of Education, Robert Nyaberi, said that the students may have walked out to participate in circumcision ceremonies, which was not the case. He urged parents to get in touch with the principal to ensure that their students return to school. But the 51 students have said they are not going back until they're sure.
They're citing COVID.
They're citing COVID. They're citing COVID after 2 students started coughing and complaining of chest pains. Could be something else, and parents are being urged for these children to return to school.
Is there something? Is there like a history? Is there a neighboring school where students tested positive or students had fallen sick? So students complained of coughing, 2 of them.
2 of them,
and
yes.
chest pains, and 51 others said,
We might also get this.
We're going home.
Would 51 students at the same time go and also attend these circumcision ceremonies? Yeah?
Yes.
They're citing that they didn't want to be in the presence of...
Well, we've seen many times where, and I'm not downplaying what the students are raising. I mean, it's a grave matter. But we've seen many times when students have torched their dormitories, when things have happened in schools because of something. Either an exam is forthcoming or they want to go home for one reason or the other, and something happens. Now, this one, in my own opinion, it's sounding very fishy. 2 students started coughing. 51 students decided, no. This
We can't
school
stay
is not
here.
doing
You're
enough
not doing
to protect
enough
us
in
for
terms of
against
protection.
COVID.
We're not doing again.
Yeah, and that was it. They went home.
They went home. Now parents are being asked to send them back.
A pinch of salt.
Okay.
Oh, what's to do? Got a dollop.
you know, I'm still thinking about what is being attributed to Professor Magoha.
You're still there.
No, I'm still there because Professor Magoha was the VC.
He understood.
I have to ask what it is he did to encourage research at the time he was
At the time
VC.
he was there.
10 years. I have to ask that question. You know, why I'm asking that question is because right now as CS, he's in an even more powerful position. The very things he's saying ought to be done, he is in a position to influence some of these things. He is the CS, not the PS, CS. I have to ask what it is that he has done. Challenge received, valid points made, mode of delivery, there and there. But what
Track record.
Yes, what has he done? Because if he accompanied what he's saying by what has said, the ministry has done this, and the ministry has done this, and this is what we've positioned, and against this backdrop, this is what we've received, that is sufficient weight. But to simply throw out what is clear and obvious, and given his background and what he could have done then and what he can do now,
Is it possible that it's just missed out in the reporting?
it is very possible that
Probably
the reporting is what
The
is where the
entire
error has
session
concerned.
there had a lot of, presentations and all about what the ministry is doing, why they were sitting down to discuss research in the first place, is the ministry's role in research, the university's role in research, and all.
There's no want for the different quotes that he made throughout this entire session. This report talks about the different things that he did say. And now talking about the fact that he's in a position to influence because more of the control and power that he has, he realizes the research gaps that are in the country. He knows this. He knows that, we talk about the Abuja declarations all the time and how much of a country's budget, for example, should go towards things like research. He understands this. But it's interesting because he went off to say that also we do not have enough critical nucleus to do research. And those who cannot do that are being sent home forcefully. Yet these top grade scientists and researchers have a bigger output. So he knows that they can put out something. And he also realizes the crutch that is in place because of adequate funding. So it seems as if he was saying two things at the same time. Realizing the crutch that is there, but then also not wanting to say that, okay, well, maybe there are some opportunities, but we're not being able to take full advantage of them. So I think here he understands it, but maybe using his power in a way that was not totally right.
Yeah. A number of issues. CT, tell us about Governor Obado, where he's working from.
Well, if I were to go by what has been stated in The Nation on page 6, they say Obado finds way around court order barring him from office. And this is how it is explained. Inventiveness. They say the inventiveness is as follows. Several rooms at the bungalow, his bungalow, have been converted into offices hosting aides and senior county officials, while his main office is in the living room. The block is located some 2 kilometers away from the county headquarters, and its compound is dotted with tents with a red carpet rolled out for dignitaries who call upon the governor.
So basically, he has moved office, but he has just gone into his own home and converted it into offices. And he's conducting the business of the county from this particular premise.
The governor's office, it's like the governor has had two offices all along. There is the headquarters of the county of Migori, and there's where the governor conducts his business. It is 2 kilometers away. It is a structure, it's a building, and it was like the governor's private offices. But now it looks like county functions that were carried out within the premises of the county official offices are now being conducted here. And that is what is being referred to as a circumvention.
So this bungalow, who owns the bungalow? Is it the county government or is it his part?
No, I don't think it is owned by the county. No. Maybe the county took it over, but it has always been a private residence. It has not been part of the county. Not really.
Okay. So that whole thing of saying you're barred from office is basically being translated here into physical office.
You know, if we go strictly by the law, he is not abrogating any rules, is he? Because when they say office, it is assumed that every county has a headquarters, and that is where the offices of the governor will be based. But for the longest time, yes, the governor has offices within the county, the official county premises, but he has also had this office. This is not a new office.
You know, when this matter went to the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal judges danced around it.
Yes.
It came out to say, in fact, it was in the case of, which governor was it? Was it Lennon Kulal or was it...
Yes, it was him.
It was Nairobi.
It was Sonko.
It was
right?
both. No, it was both of them.
So they were saying that this person is still a governor. He has not been relinquished of his duty as governor, but he's just being barred from office. And they did not say. So should he transact any business on behalf of the county government? Should he not? Because this is what the DPP was asking clarification on. This is a very interesting one.
It is.
So last week, the president gave out some title deeds in Nairobi, remember? At KICC. Among those title deeds was a 2,000-acre government land that was formerly known as Sheep and Goat Research Facility, and that title deed was now handed over to the Nairobi National Park. But leaders from Kajiado and Mavoko have termed the move a classic example of historical land injustices and oppression of the poor. The disputed piece of land in Mavoko sub-county is occupied by Maasai natives. It was previously utilized for sheep and goat rearing before the project collapsed in the 1970s. But Kajiado Governor Joseph Olelenku says the decision was made without the consultation of the natives, who had followed all due process to have the land reverted to them. As the Maa community, we demand the land back or compensation. Former Kajiado Governor David Nkedianye said the move is a recipe for chaos, as the community has over the years protected the land from grabbers. It's unfair to push them away from an ancestral land. The community is now living in fear of being evicted and rendered homeless. But Mavoko MP Patrick Macau said the idea was mooted to take away ancestral land from its owners without following proper procedure. All of them are complaining and saying, look, giving this land to the Nairobi National Park was wrong. The land should have been given to the natives who are occupying that piece of land. 2,000 acres.
Wow. Okay.
You can expect to see, if the Nairobi National Park dare move in rangers there and starts fencing off and saying, you know what, this is part of Nairobi National Park.
The drama has just begun. But once again, you see, I have to ask the question, was due consultation done? This public participation that we keep speaking of, was it done?
The leaders claim, according to the leaders,
They did what they needed to
it
do.
wasn't done.
We shall see in due course, won't we?
Sure, we will.
Coming to the top of the hour, this is Kenya's biggest conversation. In the next hour, let's talk about Kenya's debt crisis. Are we in a debt crisis? Are we not? A coalition of civil society organizations calling itself the Okoa Uchumi Coalition has come together to raise this issue of Kenya's debt levels, how much we've borrowed, how much we have unable to pay, how much we are running with as budget deficit every year. And this is a conversation that must be had. So we'll be having that conversation in the next hour. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room, broadcasting on 94.4 in Nairobi, 102.5 in Kisumu, 87.9 in Mombasa, 96.0 in Nakuru. In Eldoret, we are on 96.7. In Nyeri, it's 90.9. And Malindi is 97.7. We will be live on KTN Home in the next hour. It's now 7 o'clock.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
Okay, so what's it looking like now? We still have the issue at Maimahu. We're getting details for that. Kilometers of traffic as you headed out of the city today. It's quite a mess, folks. So if you're going in that direction, please know that is what lies ahead. The traffic on Wayaki Way starts at Uthiru Junction, and there is yet another operation at Kikuyu Town. Folks are checking for masks, guys. So put them on because you want to be careful and stop, the risk of corona happening to you. But at the same time, there is an operation going on, so you don't want to get on the wrong side of the law. Okay? We also have quite some flooding on Mombasa Road today. This is around Bellevue. Some of that being attributed to the construction at the expressway. So there's a lot of water in the middle of the streets right now on Mombasa Road. This adding to the traffic that is already piling up from the SGR, moving all the way down past Capital Centre. Traffic on Jogo Road started as far back as Donholm today. Mombasa Road, we've already talked about. Looking then towards Thika Road, it's piling up all the way from Survey. The service lanes are open, though. Those can be used without much of a hiccup. At Kiambu, the junction there, as you try to then join towards Muthaiga Corner, that's an absolute mess already, even before 7 o'clock. Looks like it's going to be an interesting day on the roads today. We're going to ask you to be careful because they're still slippery, these roads. Visibility is poor in Westlands as well.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only
It's
way
2.5
to start
minutes
your
after 7.
day.
Thank you very much for tuning into the Situation Room this Tuesday morning, wherever you are tuned in. On Spice FM, online on spicefm.co.ke or Spice FM KE, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Or on KTN Home, where we'll be live for the next 2 hours. As we begin the hour, C.T. Muga has today's proverb.
Gold should be sold to the one who knows the value of it.
Gold should be sold to the one who knows the value of it.
Sounds simple and straightforward enough. But as I keep thinking of it, it isn't as simple and as straightforward as it sounds.
It isn't. Because you have to ask yourself, so what do they have in mind? These old men and women,
Well,
when they came up with this proverb.
yes, a thing of value, that bit we understand. Yes. But like with most proverbs, questions will arise.
Yep.
And usually there are more questions than there are adequate responses.
And you will find context,
Yes.
I'm sure, with what you're discussing on a daily basis, what you're facing on a daily basis. Well, welcome to the show, the second hour of The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. So let's talk about Kenya's imminent debt crisis. Kenya's debt has been rising since 2013 from 1.8 trillion shillings to 6.6 trillion shillings. This has led to high public debt repayments, which are squeezing out other public expenditure priorities, and the country is now forced to borrow to meet its recurring needs, with debt repayments almost outstripping revenue collection. We had this conversation last week as well, and we looked at it from the point of how much are we raising, how much are we paying in terms of debt. It's close to 1 trillion shillings. We are raising about 1.4 to 1.6. This year, of course, you expect to see a drop in the revenues collected by the country, but you're not going to see a drop in the repayments of debt. So are we facing a debt crisis? Are we going to get there at some point? Last week, when we looked at it, we looked at it from the angle of gender, and then what this debt crisis would then mean to gender and the vulnerable communities. And just because the government is now not left with enough money to finance its development projects, some of those that take a direct hit are the vulnerable communities. That brings in the gender issue as well. That brings in the persons with disabilities. That brings in children. So those are affected. What are these issues that we need to keep discussing and raising about debt all the time, and why does Kenya's debt issue become a conversation that appears to only be had by a section of the citizens, but not a collective of Kenyans, including the government?
It would appear that on one side, there's not an understanding of what really is going on when we talk about the country being in debt, and the citizens not really understanding how far down, or rather how deep down this rabbit hole the country actually is. So there's a part of understanding. On the other side of it, when it would be that the side who would have the control or would have the power is just then disinterested in making sure that things are running the way in which they should. So there's a disconnect between people having a comprehension of what is really going on when the entire country has essentially been mortgaged away, or not being interested in explaining to Kenyans, or at least saving the country from this imminent danger.
Well, what I sometimes wonder when I look at or when I listen to the discussions around it is people who lend money are referred to as banks, lending institutions. And the principles that they use in lending money, I believe, are the same as when one is seeking to actually be lent money by an institution as an individual. They do due diligence and they determine your ability to pay. So it's not as though they are giving us money; they lend us money because we have shown and we have clear indication that we are able to pay. So at what point then does this issue of debt become an issue? And do these people lend us money knowing that we cannot pay? Or do they lend us money knowing very well that we will default? Or have they done due diligence and know very well that we are able to pay? And if that is the case, then why and where is the danger?
You'd expect that some of those credit rating companies and organizations such as Moody's and the rest that give us, a very good score, they have looked at all those things. They have looked at your capacity. They've looked at your the mix of your economy. And many people have even said Kenya's economic mix is brilliant. It's lovely. We have agriculture, we've got tourism, we've got other, there's many sides that contribute or many sectors that contribute to this economy. So even now, during the COVID-19 period, I've said agriculture was actually now the one that was holding the economy together. So when they look at us and they say, right, the capacity and the ability of this economy to be able to raise enough money to pay the amount of money that they're borrowing looks good enough. And then you get to a point where they're not looking at the capacity of the government to absorb, or maybe even the corruption levels, and saying, if we give them money, then it's most likely going to it's only 7 billion shillings, and it's a bank guaranteed. So the dams will be built. No, we don't have that conversation maybe at that level. They're just looking at what's your capacity to borrow, and even if they mix with every other risk factor, they still say, you look good enough. You look creditworthy. So our creditworthiness is good, and that's why we're able to go ahead and borrow. But the issues that emerge, and that's what even Ndu you were raising, is about the transparency of this whole issue. How do Kenyans participate in this whole process in terms of just even knowledge? Yeah, when you talk about public participation as one of the pillars of good governance, even put in the constitution, is that being practiced? Does it come in at the level of this is how much we've borrowed, this is what we intend to do with this money, and this is the progress of the development program?
I mean, those questions are valid questions and they must be asked. But there is a hype about the danger that we are in with the monies that we have borrowed and the ceilings that the parliament keeps setting, raising it higher and higher, vis-a-vis what the Kenya Revenue Authorities are able to collect. Now, it appears that we collect money to pay debts. And the question one asks is this: is that the true picture? Is it that we collect money to pay debts, or is it that even our collection method should be brought into question to actually determine, are we actually collecting what we are able to collect? And then there's this other matter which keeps popping up. The budget items that we keep having to deal with, which clearly surpass what is collectible. You have this budget of X trillions, and you have Y trillions, which is evidence as what is being collected. So that disparity also forms a different aspect of the conversation. So really, what are we dealing with? Is it noise being made for the sake of noise, or are we actually in danger? Because if we do not pay our debts and we default, our credit rating will plummet. And then suddenly we'll have more problems than we thought we previously had.
Yeah. And the importance of raising that conversation is actually now asking ourselves those hard questions. Are we actually in any imminent danger? Or is it just a conversation that's just being pushed out there? And also, if we are indeed in that imminent danger, then what is it that we should do? If we are not in imminent danger, where are we? What's our situation? And this is the reason why the Okoa Uchumi Coalition, a platform committed towards working with all stakeholders to redress this imminent public debt crisis, was formed and brought together. Let's today speak with Wanjiru Ikonyo. Wanjiru is the national coordinator of the Institute for Social Accountability, and she joins us now on the line. Good morning, Wanjiru.
Morning, Eric. How are you?
Hey, it's been a minute.
It's been too long. I can see you people forgot me. You don't know my status vis-a-vis COVID.
It's not possible.
It's not possible.
Not possible
my
to
sister.
forget you.
You really must stop listening to these rumors that I think some malicious people are
I've
saying.
tried to tell you, it's a lie.
Investigations must be launched, CT.
We know very well what your
who
COVID
was the
status is.
orchestrator?
We were even updated on what we call the Wanjiro Wealth Index. We were told. We were told, and in detail. So we have been keeping tabs on you.
You see, now you don't invite me. I miss all these goodies. I didn't know there's an index like this.
There is.
My sister, you need to lobby for me.
Don't
Whoever
worry.
has orchestrated my removal on suspicious and spurious and illegal grounds.
It has
must be dealt
been
with.
presented to the feet of the elders. Don't worry.
Good.
Hey. Okay. Are we now? Can we now make peace, Wanjiro?
Yeah, we must make peace. We are,
All right.
yes.
Welcome to the Situation Room this morning.
Asante sana.
It's good
Happy
to have
be
you.
here.
Tell us about the Okoa Uchumi Coalition. What are the objectives? What's the purpose of bringing together the organizations that form the Okoa Uchumi Coalition?
Thank you. And, thank you for the opportunity to share this. And Okoa Uchumi is a coalition of civil society organizations because we realized we are working around important national issues, in particular the issue of the national budget, national infrastructure, and debt. And, we have great institutions such as the IEA that had been doing a lot of work, IDP, working with the public to engage government, in the public participation process. So we realize as civil society, different groups are working across the sectors, looking at taxation, looking at the East Africa region, and we are making submissions as anticipated in the law, because the Constitution anticipates that sovereignty, of course, is vested in the people, and public finance shall be guided by principles of accountability, public participation, transparency. So we were doing our part. We've been doing our part. But we're not getting responsiveness. Our political leaders, the executive officers, the public officers, are not taking on board our submissions. And as a result of this disconnect, we then find a situation where we are in a debt crisis. In fact, it's not imminent. We are in a debt crisis. And this is agreed, even if you look at government's own documents. The budget review and outlook paper published end of September says that we are at risk of debt distress. And we are actually now borrowing to pay debt, which is illegal. This is not supposed to be the case. So we got together to address the political question because we said the law is there, the law is understood, yet our actors from the Treasury to Treasury Executive, which is the presidency and all of that, to Parliament, have undermined the laid down procedures and put Kenya in an unsustainable position. And this was the case before COVID. And with the coming of COVID and the restrictions around COVID, we've then seen this issue escalate so that businesses now are forced to close down. Unemployment has reached, the last official figure that we were given is 1.2 million Kenyans had lost their livelihoods. The figure is likely more, because we have a huge informal sector that's not easy to quantify. We also saw a report about a month back saying that in the last 6 months, Kenyans have borrowed 345 billion in online borrowing. So we are in major distress. We saw the fight over the sharing of revenue with the president saying there is no money. Of course, they eventually had to give 50 billion, but that is not even to be realized this financial year. So we then see services aren't being funded. People who had taken contractors, the pending bills issue. Pending bills is because government is not able to pay for services that have been rendered to it. So we are in a crisis. And we felt the reason is political. So let us get together as civil society and address the issue, the political issue.
Okay, so Wanjiro, based on all of that you've said, I mean, now we're looking at Kenya's debt and borrowing policy, right? According to the measures that the World Bank has offered up, Kenya's debt is sustainable. So if according to these World Bank requirements, the debt of the country is sustainable, then why then would we say that Kenya is in a debt crisis if according to the global governing financial bodies, it's sustainable and it's something that can be worked out? Then why the crisis talk?
First of all, there's the technical aspects, and I think that's an excellent question, and Kenyans get confused because of what is said. In terms of the World Bank, the IMF, there are indicators that they use, and there's 4 measures. And Kenya was within those measures until 2018. It then defaulted on breached one of the measures, and the risk rating was then downgraded. In March of this year, again, we breached another. I think we breached 3 of them out of the 4. So, first of all, the credit rating, rating us now to high risk, as has happened, was because we breached the measures. The discussion on sustainability, I'll quote something a colleague said, James Muragori, when he said, is Kenya's debt sustainable? Yes, on one hand, it's sustainable because Kenyans there's revenue being collected. There's up to 1.4 billion, even with the impacts of COVID. Trillion, sorry.
Yes.
Even with the effects of COVID, Kenyans are doing their part. We are generating the revenue. However, when you look at what government is doing with the money we are raising, that is where the problem comes in. Like I said, when you have businesses that are shutting down because they delivered goods, government procured their services and didn't pay, and those businesses have taken loans and are not able to pay those loans, and businesses then go out of business. We are finding a rise in suicide rates. When you find government allocation to services, which is the bedrock of our society, is going down, because we've discussed this before. When you talk about the shareable revenue, how much is going into health? Kenya is supposed to be putting in 15% of the budget in health. We are presently at around 6%. So we are underinvesting in health. You talked about it, agriculture. This is where majority of Kenyans are employed. It's the main contributor to the GDP. And you find the investments in agriculture are going down. So when you talk about sustainability, there's the numbers, but then there's the reality on the ground. And I think you said this, the problem with the way the international financial institutions measure sustainability is looking at a set of numbers that don't deal with the political reality. And in our campaign, we've identified there's a conflict of interest, because on one hand, the institutions that are rating you are also the ones who are lending. And at the end of the day, once you lend, you have to pay. And you've seen with the debt relief conversation, Kenya is not able, or rather has been reluctant to pursue debt relief, because they say, well, we have a contract that doesn't allow us, a contract with an outside agency that doesn't allow us to deal with our local debt issue. So there's a conflict of interest that we intend to look at, and we need to be alive to. How can the raters, the people who are making recommendations to us, be the ones also lending us money? That's a conflict of interest. And I think Citi also said, what about the due diligence? And is this being done? And you will find instances where investments have come in and the due diligence wasn't done because of this conflict of interest, because the institution coming to do the due diligence stands to benefit from the amount that's going to be paid by Kenyans. So,
are we dealing here with a transparency issue? Are we saying that government dealings are not above board insofar as what ought to be known or what ought to be in the public domain is not in the public domain, and that even when an inquiry is made as to more information being made available, it isn't available? Is this the case? Is this what we're dealing with here, Wanjiru?
Yes and no. Government has availed a good amount of information through the regular budget process, through that regular reporting. There are details that are missing. And so it's yes, there's information out there, but no, not all the information that needs to be. The Budget Accounts Committee of the National Assembly in February sanctioned the CS of Treasury because he said, look, you're not giving us adequate, up-to-date information. So, for instance, the debt register is not updated. There's supposed to be an annual report on debt. This report also not updated. So we don't have the report, for instance, from last year. We don't have also some of the details of the contracts that have the negotiation and also where the money is going. Some of these details are not there. So we have public participation. We have government reporting, but the devil is in the details, and there is a systematic withholding of crucial information. So, CT, to answer your question, government is ticking the box so that if you look at it on the face of it, the documents are there, but there is a transparency issue. In fact, the IMF in its country assessments of Kenya also noted there are accountability deficits.
Is there a threshold for transparency? Meaning, are there boxes we can tick when we're talking about transparency and say, okay, this is what we need to tick to actually meet that basic threshold for transparency?
I'm trying to think if there's an easy answer and if you want to go on thresholds. Yes. What you need is, the question is, do we have enough information at the various stages of the debt process? Number one, what is the reason for which debt is being procured? Number two, what is the cost of this debt? Number three, what is the purpose? At the spending stage, have we ring-fenced that money? And what we are saying is that at these crucial stages, we do not have the right information. So debt is procured for projects, but when you look at how those projects are arrived at, for instance, the SGR, for instance, medical equipment, that one already is fully in the public arena, fully canvassed. How was this project originated? What was the due diligence? That becomes the first problem. So when you're procuring debt for a non-productive investment, what is the accountability? So we are lacking accountability in the in the prioritization process. The Auditor General said we are budgeting for corruption. You put projects in the budget for the sole purpose of driving corruption. And actually, you can look at it that the SGR at the point it was procured in 2016 was 4.5% of the GDP in terms of the size. Now, the World Bank says that countries should spend about 4.5% of their GDP on infrastructure to spur growth. And they say this is a good level of expenditure that can spur growth and sustainable infrastructure. Now, in 2016, Kenya procured one
infrastructure project.
One infrastructure project. And when you look at that infrastructure project, there was no due diligence done. Though it was parachuted into the budget. It was then scaled up. From the original estimated cost, it was, the final cost was about 4 times the original estimate. So to answer CT's question, at all these stages, the conversation about SGR was there, but the crucial details were not in the public domain. And more critically, these details are not with Parliament. And Parliament asks for them, or sometimes doesn't ask for them, but they still endorse and pass the resolutions. So would I say access to information is a problem? Yes, it is. But the bigger problem we have is that we've got a very strong Parliament in terms of the powers given in the Constitution. It hasn't exercised those powers to say no, to stop executed projects that are political in nature, that are driving corruption. And unfortunately, our huge budget growth, because we've had a very huge budget growth, about, I think we were saying, is it 2.5 or 3 times since 2013, is not being driven by services. It's not being driven by let's put more money in agriculture. We are spending 2-3%. We are supposed to be spending 10. We are not putting more into health. We are spending 6%. We should be spending 15. Spending on education has been going up because of the very strong union. Unfortunately, these large infrastructure projects are what have ballooned our budgets. So our expenditure, our borrowing and expenditure have gone towards these large infrastructure projects, bringing then the next question, what is the return?
On that
Because
investment.
maybe we...
Let's take a break at this point, and then we shall come and answer that question. What is the return on all this investment that we've made in terms of borrowing, in terms of how much our budget has even ballooned since 2013, just in a couple of 8 years, from 1-point-something trillion shillings to 3 trillion shillings. 27 minutes after 7, this is a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation on Spice FM, on KTN Home and online. We are speaking with Wanjiru Gekonyos. He is the National Coordinator for the Institute for Social Accountability, talking about Kenya's debt chokehold, where we are at, and what we ought to do about it. Good morning. We'll be back shortly.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life. 24/7, around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM.
Next week on The Great Kenyan Bake Off.
Nayo, hapa na hapa.
It's the first of 2 dessert weeks, and Heat 1 are about to face an interesting twist in the technical that will really test their taste buds.
It's going to be fun.
Don't miss the fun as the bakers put their best construction skills on display
Instincts.
to create a very colorful showstopper.
I'm so tired.
The Great Kenyan Bake Off, brought to you by Unga Limited, inspiring a nation to bake.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM.
Next week on The Great Kenyan Bake Off.
Nayo, hapa na hapa.
It's the first of 2 dessert weeks, and Heat 1 are about to face an interesting twist in the technical that will really test their taste buds.
It's going to be fun.
Don't miss the fun as the bakers put their best construction skills on display
Instincts.
to create a very colorful showstopper.
I'm so tired.
The Great Kenyan Bake Off, brought to you by Unga Limited, inspiring a nation to bake.
The weather with Spice FM.
It's mostly cloudy this morning in Nairobi at 23. We'll see those mostly cloudy conditions for most parts of today. A chance of rain coming in later. Looking at other cities around the country, in Nakuru, it's mostly cloudy at 12. We'll see highs of 24. Mostly cloudy in Nyeri as well. 17. It's quite warm in Nyeri this morning, going to highs of 23. In Eldoret, partly cloudy at 13, going to highs of 22. The high will be 28 in Kisumu today. It's partly sunny at the moment at 18. Mostly sunny conditions in Kakamega as well at 18, going to highs of 27 and coming down to lows of 15. Rain showers experienced in Mombasa this morning at 24. We'll go to highs of 27. The high will be 29 in Malindi, where it's mostly sunny this morning and sunny conditions to last through most parts of today. It's mostly sunny in Kampala at 20, going to highs of 25 and lows of 18. Dar es Salaam this morning is experiencing light rain showers, likely to continue through most parts of the morning to highs of 29 in terms of temperature. Johannesburg at 18 degrees is experiencing rain as well, going to highs of 21. And Lagos, light rain showers this morning at 25, will go to highs of 31. And for now, Kinshasa also experiencing rain this morning, going to highs of 32 and lows of 20.
Chilled Spice. Spice FM, Nakuru. Traffic.
Okay, so if traffic were animals, this morning it's a snail's pace in a lot of areas, from Jogo Road to Westlands, coming all the way from Mogoga, heading down towards the roundabouts at Westlands. It's moving very, very slowly today. Not quite sure what the problem is. We haven't seen traffic like this in Westlands for some time, but that's happening. There is flooding of the roads right around industrial area, then moving towards Nyayo Stadium from the Likoni road side of things. So that has flooded. You need to be careful, especially for smaller vehicles heading in that direction. We don't want you to get caught up in that water that has pooled there. So that's between the City Stadium and Enterprise Road. So please be cautious as you approach. Go slowly so that you don't get stuck. The Maimahiu situation still continues. There's kilometers of traffic in that area as you're headed outside of the city. The travel on that road has been paralyzed for now. Still looking for reasons as to that. We'll let you know in a short while as we find out the reason. But if you're headed there, please know what's ahead. All right. The 104 is experiencing crazy traffic today around Westlands. That's where you're headed. Spice of MKE, reach us on Twitter or text us on 40127.
Spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
It's 26 minutes to 8 o'clock. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. This and every weekday morning. In the room is Eric Latif Ndu Oko and C.T. Muga. Joining us on the line this morning is Wanjiro Gekonyo. She is the National Coordinator for the Institute for Social Accountability. We are discussing Kenya's debt chokehold. And as we were going into the break, Wanjiro, you talked about then the other question would be the return on investment, or the return that we get from all these that we invest in. What would your answer be to that?
In fact, it's just that I don't have the figures, because the World Bank, for instance, has a report where they evaluated, they were looking at fiscal consolidation in a time of COVID. And, you know, they listed the various infrastructure projects and, you know, many of which have stalled. So on one hand, there's a whole raft number of projects that have been initiated that have stalled. The Auditor General also is on the record around many of the large infrastructure projects that are riddled with corruption, and also questioning the cost efficiency and productivity. So whether it's looking at money that was spent on the dams, looking at the medical equipment, looking at things like even the last mile connection. And, you know, so really you know, we have a problem in this country. And I remember the World Bank did an excellent report around 2014, when they were looking at what happens with devolution. You know, what are the potentialities? And part of what they pointed at is Kenya is extremely inefficient. So, and you saw this play out around the LAPSET, where we had investors pulling out because they said the cost of compensating people for building the pipeline was, totally exaggerated, exorbitant, extortion. You've also seen with the SGR, Ethiopia built an SGR with the specifications of ours. I mean, theirs is actually electrified. Ours is not. Ours runs on diesel. Theirs is twice as long, and we paid the same amount of money. So there are these inefficiencies, but really it's corruption, and it's budgeted corruption that has riddled Kenya and has come to play. So that is one aspect. The other aspect that is undermining the productivity is the motivation for the projects. So there's corruption in terms of the costing, but there's also corruption in terms of the type of initiative. And if we look at, for instance, the electrification last mile connection, excellent idea. But however, there is a national plan that had identified the problem of last mile was that it was too expensive to connect these homes. So the issue was the cost structure of the sector, the energy sector. And of course, you know that there is corruption in that. And there's a campaign that's run by Jerotich Sei around opening up who are the beneficiaries of this very expensive electricity that is crippling Kenya's economic growth. So this is what had been identified. But then came along this Power Africa project. Actually, it was under our favorite U.S. President Obama's administration, where they then negotiate with government and they fund the last mile, and they put in money, but they bypass the official report and the laid out plan. And so they go and put in money, and last mile then didn't work because the motivation for taking the money is that the money was available. So we are seeing there's this very unhealthy relationship between international financial institutions and sovereign states, where debt is being procured for projects that are not in the national plan because the money is readily available, especially for the commercial kind of lending. And unfortunately, a lot of support to African countries is coming in the form of commercial lending. So you've seen in countries like the US, and we are seeing other countries setting up their own commercial lending arms. So there's a report we did, an assessment that was prepared for us, and the consultant told us we have a race to the bottom. Whereas there are Paris principles that are supposed to protect the relationship between IFIs and make them responsible. So international financial institutions should be responsible in the kind of debt they make available. These rules are not being complied to. China has come in, and countries are posturing for global significance, and so there's a lot of money coming into African countries, and we're not the only ones. Actually, Kenya is not the only one in this crisis. Zambia, Ethiopia, even Ghana, with the onset of COVID. So what we are seeing driving this is, for us, we've looked at the situation and said there's a lack of accountability by IFIs to the people of Kenya. So our sovereignty is being undermined by institutions that then set conditions that then affect us. So IMF standard conditions are taxes. Taxes standard is go for indirect taxes, VATs, tax the informal sector that don't have the clout to push back, turnover tax.
Yeah.
So this breeds. So
as all this is happening, Wanjiru, where is the public, and in terms of public participation? So we know we give ourselves this constitution that gives us the power to participate, especially in the budget making process. You've even actually on this show, you've told us how you've championed public participation in budget making process. Where is the public participation in this, in the making of the budget, in the approval of the loans, and even knowing how much money has been borrowed, how much of it goes into the budget, and how much of it is being appropriated to the various functions?
Very good question. And there is no budget participation at that point of of loan contracting. In fact, there's no participation also by counties. So there's no intergovernmental conversations around that. And Parliament's role has been inadequate. So actually, this has been a very closed space where even the oversight institutions like the Controller of Budget and Auditor General argue or complain that they are not able to get access to information. So one of the main things of this campaign is we need to open up that. We are saying, look, procurement of debt is part of the public finance management process. It should be subject to the articles of the Constitution, and it should respect the sovereignty of the country, of Kenyans. So we need to open that up. And we are a bit concerned. There's a debt policy that was enacted some 2-3 months ago. We participated in this process and gave submissions. But when we saw the final copy, we see, a Treasury, a government really that's saying they didn't take up our submissions in terms of how to open up this space. So we really see a government, and, a colleague made this comment. If you look at the conversations around Eurobond, and, Eurobond was 2013, 2014, where the government, the CS, was unable to explain where the money went. And, Eurobond was commercial borrowing. Commercial borrowing does not have the same kind of accountability requirements as borrowing from the IMF or the World Bank. And government took this money and went to town with it. They couldn't account where it went. But then you come to COVID. All these many years, some 5-6 years later, same thing recurs. So the Auditor General actually makes this observation because they did an audit of the COVID, the first phase of COVID spending, and they say, have we not learned anything? And so this is why we say, as a campaign, we are looking at the issue of political accountability, because the problem is answerability. It is not the law, it is not the numbers, and the Treasury is fudging some of the numbers and giving inconsistent figures, across the board, and that in itself is actionable. So the issue is accountability, and as we engage, our aim is to open up the dialogue. Our aim is also, of course, we want to push for this balanced budget, which is more the traditional work we do, which is looking at the budget making process and looking at the policy framework. But the third thing we want to do is talk accountability. Who is going to answer? And how do we ensure that those responsible answer? And so that we can stem this tide of political officers running amok with our resources, because they are very comfortable
can Kenyans
that
be
we will pay.
involved in this, Wanjiru? Because or do we say that there will be some kind of representation by a select group of people, such as civil society, or core uchumi, like you're talking about now, that would represent the greater population of Kenyans? We look at other countries where public participation, it goes without saying. People are involved in the naming of a road, for example, something as basic as that. And people are heavily vested in how that process plays out. How do we get to that point on the continent, here in Kenya specifically? How then can people actually be involved in this, or must there be representation for the greater population of Kenyans?
That question has several answers. On one hand, as the coalition, we want to raise the awareness, we want to open the space, and we want to bring citizens with us. So we want to work with citizens to open up the space. That's what we want to do as a coalition, because we are saying that the public participation processes that are taking place are tokenistic, and they're not responding to the real needs of Kenyans, and they're undermining our sovereignty. I think the other question you ask is, what is the representation of citizens? And you are exactly right. Parliament has failed to represent citizens, to represent the country, to execute its mandate on the issue of debt accountability. Parliament has been pocketed by the executive. If you look at the reports, actually, you'll find Parliament very good statements. So Parliament will say, no, this information isn't there. This is very questionable. So they posture, they raise the questions, but then they go ahead and approve. So the problem is you have this unhealthy relationship between the executive and Parliament, which is why, as a coalition, we haven't yet discussed the issue of the BBI. But, from an institutional point of view and from a personal point of view, I'm very concerned when you look at expanding the powers of the president in a situation where we have actually had an undermining of oversight. And I'll read a quote because we've talked about the issue of state capture on this program before. And Wachira Maina in the AFRICOG report says, the difficulty in fighting corruption lies in the union of corruption and politics. State institutions and processes are repurposed to gut state resources for electioneering to maintain power. Oversight institutions must be eviscerated and hollowed out. So when you talk about state capture, it is that you have the laws, you have the constitution, you have the processes, we are going through the motions. But behind the scenes, you have an alternative, you have the hidden state or the deep state. And that is the one that is driving decisions that then blow up your budget, take all your revenue towards debt repayment, and drive heavy taxation. So the problem we have of growing taxation now, you're looking at how do you institute? During the time of COVID, you're instituting new taxes.
It's actually a good... on that note, Wanjiru, I like what you're saying. Let me just ask this, because that narrative receives a welcome hearing from me. But beyond talking about it, is there anything else the coalition hopes to do to ensure that the message not just resonates within the people within the coalition, but that the country actually gets to appreciate what it is that the coalition is trying to do?
Okay, good one. Like I said, we have a coalition of different institutions, and some of the institutions who are within the coalition have very strong networks at the local level. So whereas now we've started out with a national level launch where we are stating our, really our objectives and kind of just bringing out the message on forums such as this, our next stage is then to go to the local level and make sure that there are conversations with the citizens and to bring citizen voice into the national dialogue. But also, beyond bringing citizens into the national dialogue, it's to ask citizens, to explore our options because, we're in a bit of a situation like, the just ended American elections where you have an executive authority who is violating the law willy-nilly. An executive authority is such that what do you do? So when you have the office of the president, you have the treasury, you've got parliament, all of whom are violating the law, then as citizens, you say, so what do we do? So that is the question we need to ask ourselves. What do we do? How far do we go to push for accountability? But the first step we have is we're going to do the sensitization and the dialogue and open up the conversation between citizens and the IFIs, between citizens and the treasury, between citizens and these institutions. So in my view, we haven't discussed it yet as a coalition, but I believe we will take, we always say when you're looking at social accountability processes, you have to, and even in legal processes, you have to follow the due procedure. So our due procedure first is we state this. We then have the dialogues. We use our usual means, which is legislative or court means. If it needs to get to civil disobedience beyond that, then we'll look at that because we definitely have to think about how do we get political accountability. Linking to the issue of elections, and we haven't gone that far as a coalition. We are focused on the issue of debt. There is no doubt that the problem of debt is linked to our political decisions, and like we said in this relationship between politics and corruption. So yes, we'll be looking at the BBI proposals to ensure they don't undermine separation of powers and accountability, but rather enhance it. But I think the last point is when we look at what happened in America, because the response of citizens is something we need to take on board. How emboldened they were, how they did the local organizing, how, local citizens, media groups, civil society, everybody got involved. So we have to fight for our democracy, guys. I think we're telling people we can't keep waiting for our, and we've said it before, our violators to come and save us. It's not going to happen. So we need to fight for our democracy and we need to occupy our spaces. So this is our first step. And so we would like to enlist Spice FM and this team. Please join this campaign through using this platform or your other platforms. We're looking for opportunities to discuss, but we must. And some of the proposals that we have, apart from opening the space for dialogue, because we do want, we intend to convene dialogue forums, stakeholder forums. And so when you hear about these forums, please help us publicize them. For those out there, please come to them, please log on, get your voice heard. We intend to contribute constructively into the debt relief, debt restructuring process. And so we are asking for accountability around that.
Yeah.
We are asking for a curb of non-essential spending. And to our mind, it's not the time to borrow for new infrastructure projects, which has happened during the COVID time. As people's businesses are flailing, people are losing, have lost their livelihoods, government continues to borrow. And it's very sinister because government has this argument where they say, well, debt is sustainable, so they can continue borrowing. And they say, well, we are borrowing to stimulate growth. But when you build roads, you do not stimulate growth in the short term. Right now, we need investment in sectors where a lot of people are employed, and those benefits will accrue immediately. So in terms of prioritization and what is non-essential and what is essential, that is really the elephant in the room, and we'd like to get into that. And of course, pushing for transparency, pushing for accountability of IFIs vis-a-vis the people. So there's a lot on the table, but I think
you've got your work cut out for you, basically, Wanjiru. And I think it's a very good initiative that you've started here and bringing together the various organizations that have come together. And yes, the call that you've just made for others also to join, others to participate, is a good call. It's about participating in the development and the welfare of the country. It's not about the politics of it. There are people who may just look at it and think, these are civil society organizations, they're against the Jubilee government. No, it's about the welfare of the country. And if there are questions that can be asked, questions that can receive answers, and when they don't receive answers, then you have to know exactly why you're not getting the answers that you deserve. We ought to participate in this. We'll be having a conversation about Zambia later on in the 9 o'clock hour with business journalist Ramanyang from Bloomberg and CGTN. And he's covered the story of Zambia and where Zambia has gotten to a point where they are basically requesting to be given some reprieve because they're unable to submit a payment that they were due to submit a payment. This is a situation that we must avoid at all costs as a country. And indeed, Wanjiru, we thank you very much for this initiative and congratulations, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wanjiru.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one.
You too. Have a good day. Time for us to take another break right here on KTN Home. We'll be continuing the conversations, of course, on Spice FM. We are with KTN Home until 9 o'clock. So it's just a short break and then you come back. Good morning. It's now 5 minutes to 8. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room.
87.9 Spice FM, Mombasa.
So, the debt conversation is a big conversation. It's a conversation that you keep having all the time. I mean, we are at a point where almost everybody in this country knows there's a debt issue. If you look at social media posts, the president goes to meet to the Vatican for a brief meetup with the Pope, and social media will be awash with memes saying, "Ameenda kuomba sadaka." There is a conversation about our debt situation, and I think it's important for the government to come out and respond and tell us, when you say it's sustainable, how sustainable? When you say that you've borrowed this much, how much have you borrowed, and what are the conditions riding on that debt?
When we talk about the understanding or comprehension of what really happens when this debt is borrowed, is that basically what has happened is that you, the one who's taking out the loan, it's been taken out on your behalf without your knowledge of the intricate details of the same, and you then essentially will pay for it. And then you may ask the question, does that mean Kenyans will remove money from their pockets and pay for it? Well, kind of, because essentially what happens is that you will then be denied the things that you should have in a country such as roads and other kind of infrastructure, clean water, health. You will be denied those things at the expense of paying back this loan. So essentially, yes, you do pay for it by the things then that you don't get when unfortunately the debt is used, or rather this money that's gotten from these loans is to pay back other loans and is not actually used for what it's meant to be used for. So you ask yourself, how is it me taking out the loan? It is you taking out the loan because you're denied the things that this development funding should have actually taken care of. That's what it is.
But the discussion of our debt, I think, in addition to what you've said, goes to the point of explaining how it is we got into what one may call expensive commercial loans, and whose payments are required within a short period of time. And that puts real pressure as opposed to the long-term loans with a small interest rate attached to it, and which understandably we could have taken. That has been the discussion. Now, the details of the reality of this cannot be spoken of unless we also speak about how that money has been utilized, or how it has not been utilized in accordance with what we arguably it was meant for. Because this bedevils every discussion we have about our debt. That we borrowed, we understand. What we wanted to borrow it for is also stated in the public. Now, the details of what is actually done with that money, when they say the devil's in the detail, this particular one, there's a lot of devil in a lot of lack of details, because we don't know. And yet the money has been spent. And it doesn't just start with the government. If you look at government agencies, if you look at parastatals, it's like a tale of all these things being mirrored in almost every government institution. And you wonder, so what is it about us and our government? We don't seem to be able to, it's not a question of real transparency, of simply following what we ourselves have set out to do. We're the ones who set it up, not someone else tells us what to do.
If we actually just borrowed the money and then used it for what it was intended, and we were very diligent and very clear, even not to overinflate the kind of budgets that we present to ourselves, so that now we go and borrow 4 times, 5 times what a project should really be costing, really would be okay. But in the absence of that, we have to ask those questions. Who is borrowing and why are you borrowing this money? Who have you borrowed from? These commercial loans, did you have to go that route to take those very expensive commercial loans there? We're taking pride in going to be able to float a Eurobond, but should we really be taking pride in that? And what are we using that money for? Conversations that must be had, and we will continue having them right here in the Situation Room. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Keep it right here. Let's talk about the counties next. It's now 8 o'clock.
Spice up your life. 102.5 Spice
looks like
FM.
Tuesday is much worse than Monday. Folks on Jogo Road have decided to walk because the bumper-to-bumper situation is quite something. Headed to the City Stadium roundabout this morning, there's quite the puddle at that roundabout there, and asking that you please take it easy as you approach, because you're not quite sure how deep things are, right? Still the issue at Maimahiu, outside of the city. Approaching there, please be careful. Folks have been stuck on Jogo Road for about 50 minutes now, an hour. And nothing is moving, hence the walking nation is awake again. Juja Road from Kariobangi roundabout to River Road, it is not moving at all. Coming off of Figure Road as well, getting into the CBD, that's moving slowly. Kiambu Road now is at 6 lanes. Hopefully you'll get out of that one without too much damage. It's going to take some time, but you'll get off anyway. Mombasa Road all the way now from the SGR moving down towards Bellevue. Also parts of Mombasa Road flooded because of the construction on the expressway. So please take it easy as you approach puddles of water. We don't know how deep those are. Let us know where you might be stuck. We might be able to find an alternative. The Eastern and Southern bypasses, there's one. Let us know also on 40127. Text us or tweet us, SpiceFMKE.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the situation.
2.5 minutes after 8 o'clock. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, and we thank you very much for being with us this morning on Spice FM, on KTN Home, and online. As we begin the new hour, let's begin with today's proverb.
Gold should be sold to the one who knows the value of it.
Okay. Sounds pretty straightforward. You know, as a statement, not as a proverb, though. It's not very clear why it's a proverb or what it means as a proverb.
Because the meanings, that's the whole purpose of proverbs. It's supposed to be multi-layered. There's what appears to be obvious, and then when you look at it and look at the center of the discussion, it's about some valuable object.
There's something.
Yes, and then you can proceed from there onwards.
It's very clear and statement of fact. It's like saying, to walk, you put one foot in front of the other.
Not necessarily. Have you seen some folks walking?
You see, it leaves the discussion around walking sideways or walking backwards or perhaps not walking at all.
Okay, so let's talk about COVID-19 and the effect it has had on our economy, and especially at the county level. So we know, I mean, that's what we've been discussing as we're beginning the conversation with Onjiro Gekonyo in the previous hour. We talked about the kind of effects that we've seen with COVID-19. More than 1.2 million jobs lost during this COVID-19 period. People getting into financial distress, and this is also just amplified by the fact that we are seeing the amount of money that people have borrowed during this time on these mobile lending platforms. 345 billion shillings is just what was recorded a couple of weeks back. We know how, and this is not just in the urban areas, even in the rural areas, there's a lot of financial distress, there's a lot of economic distress, and people basically need a government to then refocus and re-strategize and decide this is what we need to do to recover from this. What is it that can be done immediately to spur economic activity, so that people can have money in their pockets, so that then you can also look at other social protection issues. There are people who, the people who are already on the social protection, you can imagine the government was supplementing their income by giving a little amount of money for those up over 70 years of age. But the rest of the money was basically coming from support from family members. Now, if those family members have been affected, then you can imagine the 70 and above. You can imagine the persons living with disabilities. What is it that they are facing? What is it that they are going through? So there's a lot of that's happening. And the Council of Governors, cognizant of this fact, then decided, let's form a committee. Let's look at what is it that we can do as counties to come up with, a recovery strategy. And so they came up with the Socioeconomic Reengineering and Recovery Strategy that's going to cover 2020, 2021, and 2022-23 financial years. All right? And so Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, the governor of Kisumu County, is the leader of that team that had other governors, including the one for Laikipia, Derito Mureithi. And they came up with this now. It's basically embedding response, recovery, thriving. So it's about just kickstarting livelihoods and in the economy. What do you think the main areas of this should be? What should it be focusing on?
Well, if you're talking about jump-starting an economy, you first of all want to ask yourself, the counties you're speaking of, what is it that is the bedrock of their economy?
You're right.
What is it that they do? What are they best poised to actually do economically? And then, from that point onwards, you look at their manpower, the available manpower, and you look at their manpower development plans. In all honesty, it's something that arguably the counties are perhaps best placed to do, because they would know what it is that they can do best and what it is that they can thrive in. Yes. But as to whether the stimulus response activity would actually work, I think that is something, the proof of this particular pudding would be in the eating. You start it, but with an idea of knowing, well, the knowledge that perhaps it has worked elsewhere, perhaps the little tweaking, it could work for you.
Yep.
But you cannot fully understand this unless you start it off. You have to begin it.
You've got to begin somewhere.
You have to start it.
And it's a good thing that, the governors then decided, let's do something. Let's come up with that. Let's begin somewhere and let's work out, come up with a strategy. And then now going to discussing it, thrashing it out, and implementing it immediately. But remember, we're in an emergency.
Yeah, but also making sure that the people have buy-in. Because if, no matter how good it is, if you don't take enough time to ensure people understand what it is and how it is, they can actually embrace it, my friend, you will start it and it will tank even before it has even had time to take off. Because people will not have bought into it. People have to buy into the idea. If they don't, it will not work, no matter how good it is.
It'll just be your strategy.
It'll be your strategy and it won't be theirs. It has to be theirs.
So you've got to go to the people and make them understand that this is what we plan to do.
Yes.
This is what we want to do. Even get their feedback from it and let them tell you, okay, so with this we agree and this is how we can implement it at the local level. And then this is the kind of support that you can give us. So then they feel that it's their recovery strategy, then you're all working together towards recovery.
Yes.
And without that, then we have a problem.
It will not work.
If you look at some of the areas that they say that they're working on, so like the pillars for recovery and reengineering strategies, they look at boosting the private sector activity, strengthening ICT capacity, human resource development, policy, legislative and institutional reform, strengthening the county government preparedness and response to pandemics and disasters. Sometimes you ask yourself, but this is what they've been doing on a everyday basis.
No. If it had been done on an everyday basis, this discussion would have been different. It means the plans may have been there, the benefits may have been understood, but the people on whom or with whom you're implementing it don't share that same perspective. So it appears like you're trying to implement something, but it isn't really going anywhere.
It's just not being done.
No, it's not being done in the way that it would produce the results that you anticipate.
Let's bring in the governor of Kisumu County, Professor Anyang' Nyong'o. Good morning, Prof.
Morning, how are you?
Mzuri sana. Good to have you on the show. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you.
So, Governor, let's talk about the recovery and reengineering and recovery strategy. Just looking at some of the areas that you've covered here in this one. Pillars for county recovery and reengineering, among them boosting private sector activity, strengthening ICT capacity, human resource development, policy, legislative and institutional reforms, strengthening county and government preparedness and response to pandemics. And we just went through this just now briefly, and we asked ourselves, okay, but this is what counties do on a daily basis. How different is this going to be now with COVID or post-COVID?
Well, what you must understand is that the COVID experience dislocated county economies and national economy. Just the mere shutdown of the economy meant that certain goods are not flowing freely across the country. Means that certain lines of production were not on. And when we're talking about the private sector, please don't just think of the big private sector. That's the problem that we really need. Private sector also exists in rural areas, in small shops, transporters, the market women who buy goods from the big markets in Kisumu and transport them to the small markets in the villages. the prices that might be affected because of the lack of goods, and therefore when the goods are scarce, economists will tell you that prices go up. And when there's scarcity and the points of production dry up, you have to stimulate them. So I think this is the context in which we are talking. If I give you the example of Kisumu County, during the lockdown, there was very little food in the market because the food used to come from across the borders. And once the borders were closed down and things were not working, that food was not there. That means that you learn one very big lesson, that when it comes to the basic household goods, the basic food in the household, we had better begin stimulating household economies in case another COVID strikes us in the future. But for the moment, that lesson is learned, and we need to deal with it now rather than wait until it's too late next time.
Let me just cut in here, Governor, and just interrupt you, because we need to, I think, switch on from a video interview into a phone interview. We're having issues with just getting the clarity of audio. And as we're switching over, as John is sorting that out for us, City, you've heard what the governor is saying. Basically, is there are things that need to be done. There are things that have been worked on before, but we need to look at it from a different angle. Now we have a situation. This is a COVID-19 situation. We need to talk about re-engineering this thing that we've been doing. We need to talk about recovery.
Yes, and he is right, because essentially what you're trying to say, well, what needs to be done here is you need to reject the way people look at these problems. The problem may seem the same, but the circumstances and the situation around which these things are occurring is now different. So the old ways of doing things may not necessarily work, even if they have worked in the past. Right now, because of the situation that people find themselves in, everything has to be rejected differently. Yes. Expectations also have to be re-engineered differently. Because again, things are not normal. You're not doing things the way you did them before. Everything has to change. And for this to actually be effective, people have to change the way they look at it.
Sure.
Not the way they do it, the way they look at it.
The way they look at it, and then even going then towards operations, because I tend to think, I look at this and truth be told, a lot of the interventions that would take place recovering from COVID are financial. There is money that would be spent. There are financial initiatives that then would be created to basically boost, whether it's the economy or boost individuals then who are part of the economy. And I really think and I would really hope that a lot of counties who would essentially then depend wholly on the national government in the disbursement of funds would start being innovative and creative in terms of creating financial or financing inducing activities to make sure that you have a little bit more float to get things done in the county as opposed to waiting for national government. I think there should be initiatives that going towards creation of funding. It should be the case as opposed to waiting for the national government to give all the time for everything that you need to do.
But that has to come in. You know why? At the end of the day, part of the problem that counties will tell you they have is that very same issue of the national government never giving them money which is due to them at that time they should receive it. So there's always a backlog, and which means there will be a backlog of activities, and which also means there'll be a backlog of results that are anticipated.
If the normal things that you're meant to do at county level don't get done, so here you are and you want to introduce something new, which requires, or even if it's not new, something that is going to be in support of something that was there before, it still requires finances. On top of what was normal, you're still not getting. So it seems to me that now innovation needs to come in to make sure that you're able to number one, fill up the gaps and then introduce something new. So it requires, you're very right, it requires thinking. It requires changing the mindset or the mind whereby you're waiting all the time for Big Brother to give you something. It's about time people now started thinking about these money-making activities within county.
But you see, that's where now it comes in, because if you talk about now that is own source revenue, and you're talking about boosting own source revenue, we'd come to what one of the things that this re-engineering and recovery strategy is dealing with, which is boosting private sector activity. Boosting private sector activity, what does a strategy have? Enhance access to affordable credit, provide for work sites, that is developing adequate cluster-informed and well-equipped work sites, where those things that we've been talking about, so that SMEs and startups can go and thrive, improving infrastructure and security. This requires an investment by the county so that then you can expand the opportunities for the private sector to thrive. If it starts from you're not getting adequate resources at the time that you require those adequate resources, then you're already in a fix. And the governor of Kisumu is back on the line with us, and now we're just going to have a phone conversation with him. Governor, welcome back. So, we are now talking about, what it is that you'd require to do. And the challenge that we are discussing here is, one, the money that you then need in order to be able to jumpstart or to boost some of these activities, like the issue of boosting private sector activity. There's budgetary allocation and budget disbursement from the National Treasury to the county. So then the counties are able to, for example, provide for work sites. How would you be able to develop adequate, cluster-informed and well-equipped work sites with workshops, common user facilities, incubation centers, showrooms for artisans, and providing machines and safety gear if you don't have the money? Where would the money come from?
Well, look, let's get one thing clear. Life is not always, an instant cup of tea. Things are done in processes. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and then there's the end. What we have done in the recovery process is to set goals, things we need to do to make sure that the economy wakes up after the COVID slump. Because we know for certain that during COVID, many things did not work because of the shutdown. The normal markets were not working because we had to put people in open spaces to trade. Goods were not arriving because borders were closed. And therefore, people have to learn that there's a lot of time lost, a lot of money lost, a lot of opportunities lost. And these have to be restored. That is a must. How we do it, under the difficulties in which we do it, that is a reality. But that should not stop us from doing it. When you come to this issue of revenue coming to the county in time, it is a problem. For example, when there was this crisis over the question of revenue in the state, we did not get money for 3 months. But some of us made arrangements with the banks to borrow and let activities continue. That now must be institutionalized so that borrowing from the banks does become a penalizing exercise. Those are some of the things we're discussing here in Naivasha during the BBI to find out how from now on we can stop this practice of disbursing money to the counties late, because it hurts county economies, it hurts the national economy, because Kenya is made up 47 counties. If they are hurting, the national economy is hurting. It's a joint exercise between us and national government to understand that recovering from the slump of COVID is not just a national government affair. It begins from the grassroots where county economies are planned and implemented. That is the philosophy.
What about income generating activities? I'm really looking at this as an option. I mean, because if you talk about, money dispensed from the national government coming with delays, and then counties having to go to lending institutions to make up for that time, where do income generating activities play a role here, or do they?
Any government must have income generating activities. Any government, whether big or small, must have basis of revenue based on taxation, license, and so on. And for certain, it goes on in the counties all the time. If you look at the finance act of every finance bill of every county before it becomes an act of the county assembly, it lists sources of revenue for the county. You are taxing those people who are mining sand and stones and so on. That's a source of revenue. Their market fees, that's a source of revenue. Their rent and land rates and so on, those are sources of revenue.
Are these enough? Are
what
these
happens
sufficient
is
sources?
that can I finish, please?
Sure.
Please. What happens is that the collection of this revenue may not be efficient. What we need to do as counties to ensure that revenue collection is efficient through using ICT so that the human error does not interfere with the efficiency of revenue collection. Now, one of the things that we want to do in the recovery process is to ensure that digitizing the economy in the county is carried to its optimum level so that it becomes an enabling activity for efficient revenue collection. And let me remind you that from our study that we have done, revenue collection in the county is not that bad. They're better than KRA in certain places. So this pessimism about county inefficient revenue collection is perhaps more dogmatic than realistic.
Governor, when you say that the revenue collecting systems within the counties are sometimes better than that of the KRA, let me just ask, could you highlight so that we understand which some of these areas are?
Let me tell you something. For example, counties which have established, their automation of revenue collection, collect revenue as well as Huduma centers, by the way.
Yes.
For example, e-commerce in Kisumu County is working very well, and it's working in many other counties. And we shall produce the data, by the way. When we give you county by county economic survey that is done, that indeed there are certain areas of revenue collection where some counties are done very well. It's not that bad. But that doesn't mean that everything is rosy. Of course, we must improve. There are lines where we have improved. For example, in our case, outside advertising has not been bringing us very good revenue because of corruption in the way it is collected. That must be improved.
Now, alongside this, if I may ask, there's this concept of public participation with regards to the county or the government informing the people about or transparency in its activities. In this plan that the counties have, is there a plan for ensuring that people understand what it is that the revenue collected from them actually gets to do for them?
You only need to look at WhatsApp groups in counties to understand that people are very, very, very much aware of what is going on. And through the internet, they participate effectively. And by the way, in the implementation of the ICDP, in the CIDP, County Integrated Development Plan, you cannot pass those plans before you have full public participation and before the CIDP goes to the county assembly. When it goes to the county assembly, the MCAs themselves take it back to their wards for the people to discuss it and approve it. This is structured in the County Government Act. This is structured in the various laws governing the expenditure of public resources in the county. And there are certain bills that you cannot take to the county assembly before you do full public participation.
Why I ask is because I believe if participation as you presented is actually done, then it becomes less difficult for the citizens of the counties to follow through whenever the county government has something that they have in mind and something they'd like to participate in, because they then feel they're part and parcel of the process. This is really my thinking.
I don't think so. Having been a governor for 3 years, I really don't think that's true. Because, for example, I issue state of the county address in the county every year.
Yes.
And by the way, it is received in every sub-county.
Yes.
I need to invite you to the next state of the county address, which I'm going to do on the 24th of November, to see exactly what happened. So I think that we should be much more realistic of what happened in the counties by going deeply, practically, and finding out, following processes in each county to find out exactly what goes on in there, rather than making general statements which are not supported by facts.
Let's take a break at this point. We are speaking with Governor Anyang' Nyong'o, who is the governor of Kisumu County, looking at the county re-engineering and recovery strategy that has been developed from the level of county of governors, looking at how counties can then respond and address the ravages of COVID-19, the impact of COVID-19 to the people in the counties. We are live on KTN Home. We are also live on Spice FM. We are also live online, 24 minutes after 8. Time for us to take a break. We'll be back shortly. Keep it right here.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life. 24/7, around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM.
COVID-19 imeimpact lives za wasee wengi sana. Watu wame lose jobs, kutoka mama mboga, business owner next door, neighbor amefungiwa hao na landlord. Pesa imekuwa mteja, haipatikani hata ya kuweka chakula kwenye meza. Ili kujenga jirani, unaweza toa suu moja, 100 bob only, na hii inaweza badilisha maisha ya Wakenya wengi sana. Na usisahau kuungana na sisi for the Jenga Jirani Charity Festival 7th and 8th of November on KTN Home, na pia itakuwa online on www.jengajirani.org. See you then, ili tujenge jirani and show some love.
In the face of COVID-19, life has been adversely affected, with nearly all schools in Kenya lacking basic hand-washing facilities affecting more than 19 million children. Together with Davis and Shatleaf and True Black, we, the Standard Group, have partnered to collectively unite other corporates and individuals to join the initiative towards setting up basic sanitation facilities around the country. For more information, send an SMS to the short code 40616 or email standwithkenya@standardmedia.co.ke. Time to come together for tomorrow. It's our future. A partnership by Davis and Shatleaf and True Black and the Standard Group.
Okay, so we're still looking at mostly cloudy conditions in Nairobi at 17. It'll go to a high of 23 today, still with a chance of rain later. And mostly cloudy in Nakuru as well at 16, going to a high of 24. 23 will be the high in Nyeri, partly sunny at the moment. Sunny conditions lasting through the day, as they will in Eldoret, where the high will be at 22. It's partly sunny in Kisumu at 18, going to highs of 28. And partly sunny in Kakamega as well. Highs of 27 and lows of 15. Rain showers being experienced across Mombasa. Will go to a high of 27. The high will be 29 in Malindi. Sunny conditions through today, currently at 18 degrees and warming up. It's mostly sunny in Kampala at 20. The 25 will be the high, and light rains being experienced in Dar es Salaam at 26 degrees, going to highs of 29 and lows of 24. Joburg, rain showers at 15, going to highs of 21 and lows of 13. While in Lagos, the rains continue, going to a high of 31 today. Light rain being experienced in Kinshasa at 20. The high will be 32 and lows of 19.
Spice up your life.
Okay, so Wayakiwe has joined the list of crazies this morning. It's moving very, very slowly, being attributed also to the construction that's taking place that affects the expressway. And so that's why you see heightened traffic today. Wuguga. And also at the extended 104 today, heavy traffic. The Red Hill bypass can be used, and there is an option. Mombasa Road is jam-packed all the way from Lolongo headed towards Bellevue. We also see that the flooding continues right around Bellevue. That's not been taken care of just yet. So be careful as you approach. Also, as you approach the City Stadium roundabout, Jogger Road is an absolute mess this morning, moving very, very slowly. Pools of water there, so be careful before you venture in. All right? Thika Road coming off Kiambu Road, joining with Kiambu Road and Muthaga Corner at the underpass at Pangani. That's moving slowly, but you'll get into the CBD without too much of a headache. Should you get a headache somewhere in traffic, let us know. We'll let you know what you can use in terms of service lanes or bypasses, okay? Spice FM KE on Twitter is how you can reach us, or text us on 40127.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
The Situation Room, this and every weekday morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on Spice FM. And then we are live on KTN Home between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. Our hosts every day, your hosts, Siti Muga, Nduoko, and Eric Latif. This we are talking about counties and their plan for recovery and re-engineering of the county economies after this COVID-19 pandemic. And we're speaking with Governor Anyang' Nyong'o, the governor of Kisumu County. Governor, as we were going into the break, we were looking at the various aspects of the strategy and you're talking about, the reality we've got to face. And it's true, it's a reality we've got to face. Looking at some of the the contents of the strategy in terms of the pillars of the county recovery and re-engineering, looking at how you intend to support key sectors, including agriculture, including transport, tourism, health, education, and also looking at social protection. You mentioned the County Integrated Development Plan, the CIDPs. I have a feeling that if we went to the county's CIDPs right now, we'll find a lot of these items that have been listed here as projects that should be undertaken and development projects that should be undertaken by counties are already contained there. Why is it that they haven't worked, and has the strategy sought to understand why they haven't worked so far and what it is that would make them work in this emergency time?
Precisely, because what our team was doing was to have conversation with chief ministers. Let me call them ministers because these are county executive members, rather complicated. We had conversation with relevant ministers in every county. It had something to do with agriculture. There was a Zoom meeting with all the ministers in charge of agriculture to find out what kind of problems we have faced in implementing their strategy, what kind of achievements we have had, and what kind of proposals they may be making now to tweak things differently given the experience with COVID. So we are not assuming that all stated projects have been smoothly implemented. We are aware of the fact that there have been problems in counties. Some of them may not even have been implemented, and some of them may be implemented if they are now tweaked differently, given the circumstances obtaining in counties at the moment. So when we talk about re-engineering, we are saying that we are beginning from what we know has been happening to what we think ought to happen if we have to come out of this crisis imposed on us by the COVID experience. Now, of course, the experiences will be different from one county to the other. One shoe may not fit all. If you are dealing with the pastoralist communities, for example, their issues of recovery are a little bit different from communities who are purely agricultural. If you are dealing with a community like mine, where the economy is substantially influenced by the blue economy, you have to take that into account and find out under these circumstances, if you had a plan to upgrade the blue economy, is there something you need to do differently now that will respond to the reality much better? Give you a last example. We, as a county, are a rice and sugarcane growing economy. Both sugar growing and rice growing has been in crisis for a long time. And now we need to find out whether, as we are recovering the sugar industry under the leasing program proposed by the government, are there opportunities we can seize to make sugar production with subsistence agriculture that makes life perhaps much more livable by the sugarcane farmers? The rice farmers, for example, have not in the past enjoyed the opportunity of value addition in rice. Can we now reorient our CIDP in Kisumu County to invest more in value addition in rice, and what will that cost? Those are some of the practical questions each county must ask itself, and at the Council of Governors level, we have to provide a framework for posing these questions and answering them constructively, county by county.
And as now, I'm looking at what you've talked about, going county by county, and looking and also going back to say that one situation in one county is not for sure the same across counties. The situations are not the same. Having come together to say something needs to be done, there need to be activities then that are essentially going to wake up these mini economies as we see them as counties. Can then the same measure be applied across county, taking into consideration that the situations are not the same?
But exactly, that's what I said. The same method cannot be applied. But even if the same method cannot be applied, it doesn't mean that you cannot think of measures that can be applied differently. I mean, look, the methodology may be the same, but the practical application may be different. So we are talking about methodology, re-engineering. That's a methodology.
Okay.
Restructuring. That's a methodology. But then how do you restructure from one place to the other? What is it that you are restructuring? With what kind of outcome you're expecting that restructuring to come? These are the questions that we are asking. And we did pose these questions counties by counties. We have been able to come out with recovery programs for every county, notwithstanding the fact that we have also an overarching, overall strategy for all counties. You see, that's no rocket science.
Your Excellency, let me just ask this question. When you look at the plans that you have in place, you certainly must anticipate a success rate. What do you anticipate and over what period of time?
I've not asked myself that question, but I expect there will be successes and failures. This is the reality of life. And if there are failures, then we learn why we failed and how can we correct the failure. I don't think that we should be afraid of failing. It is better to fail and learn from the failure than not make an attempt at all. Yeah.
Why I ask this question is this. If I look at, and you've painted a very good picture here, you see the strength of any economy in any country, county rather, is very much determined by what it does best, what it thrives best in. And if COVID has affected this thing very, very directly, then that recovery plan might take much longer than anticipated. And you're right in saying that you have to try. But even within that context, I'm not trying to put you in a box. I'm simply saying, even as you learn from the lessons that you will derive from implementing, is there a time span within which you hope to at least achieve something?
Obviously. I mean, plans are usually annual. There are long-term plans and short-term plans. When we did economic recovery strategy for wealth and employment creation in the Ministry of Planning many years ago, we had a 5-year strategy which worked actually. But we also realized that we need that 5-year strategy. We should think of a longer vision. This is how Vision 2030 came about. Now, in the counties, we have been forced to have a short-term planning because of COVID, because of this a quick recovery. But while we are doing that, we shall continue the discourse and find out, is it possible to have a longer-term strategy for counties, especially given the discussion we're having the BBI? We may not have thought of long-term strategy for counties before, but maybe it is high time we did so.
But in this particular case, Governor, we are coming out of an emergency which has really disrupted a lot of livelihoods, a lot of operations, even in the governments. So what are the short-term gains that you hope to see, and within how long? I'm assuming that this would not
Let me give you one example.
Within a year.
When we talk about, for example, restoring the household economy in a place like Kisumu, we are talking about a year, and we have started already. How did we start? We realized that the long rains are here. The farmers are poor. We got money, about 10 million shillings, to buy seeds for planting vegetables, which get ready in 3 months. So there's an intermediate intervention by giving farmers seeds to grow vegetables, which are for household consumption, and some extra one will go to the market. We are also establishing an exchange market in Kisumu where they can bring their extra produce, and they're given money. That produce will be put in the open market for those who want to buy it. So there are such targeted long-term strategies that counties will have to adopt depending on peculiarities of each county. In the case of Kisumu, we have taken the issue of strengthening the household economy by buying farmers seeds, both for vegetables and other crops. In the rice belt, we have decided to buy a new rice mill, which will add value to the rice instead of selling paddy rice to Uganda as they are doing now. That will give more money in the pockets of the farmers, something they've not had before. So these are the things that will come out of these short-term interventions in the recovery process, and we encourage them county by county, depending on the economy of each county. I've just given you the example of Kisumu County, which is going on at the moment. I launched it last week. It's a practicality. It's not just something in heaven.
Please go on.
These interventions take place alongside the normal work of counties. I mean, there's still things that need to be done as normal. These interventions come as a result of things that may have happened because COVID came into the situation, and would be things that need some kind of finance. Where would that come from, and how would counties be able to handle the financial
finance
burden?
must be looked for. I mean, look, there are many sources of finance for counties, for example. There are donor funds, okay? And I give you the example of borrowing money from banks, which counties like mine, who are credit rated, can do. They are the usual division of revenue bill. Their money is from own source revenue. So sources of money are there. The question is, what is the quantum of this money they're talking about? That is where the problem is. Is the quantum big enough to finance the recovery process? That is the question we must ask. That is the dialogue we must have, both
Is
by
it?
our level,
Can we ask it now? Is it?
the national government.
It's not enough.
Well, money is not enough. Even in your household, is money ever enough? So that shouldn't stop you from doing something. It's never enough, but you must look for it.
So as this strategy is being rolled out county per county, is there a timeline within which, for example, each county must come back to the Council of Governors and say, all right, so we've looked at this and we've reviewed internally, and this is what we now are saying we can roll out in the short term, 6 months to 1 year, and then 1 year going forward. Is there any sort of peer review mechanism that's being set up with the implementation of this?
Sure. In fact, we're just setting up a peer review mechanism at the moment. For the first time, there's going to be peer review mechanism in the counties, borrowing from the NEPAD experience. We are doing this in conjunction with the NEPAD Secretariat in Nairobi. That is something that's something very noble in countries, and I think it will help us. It is rooted in the Council of Governors.
Okay. And the other issue that has obviously come out during this COVID pandemic is the lack of adequate preparedness by the county governments to deal with emergencies such as pandemic, epidemic, and the other emergencies. And I see it's also contained in this report. What exactly is it that counties could do or should do so that they are prepared better? We're not just talking about health emergencies. We are seeing rains in the country. We know there are counties where when they see rain, they expect floods. This has already been happening. We know there are counties where they are already witnessing the return of locusts. So what is it that counties are doing then to boost their capacity for preparedness?
Well, even the national government wasn't prepared, by the way. That's why we had a joint action with the national government. For the first time, we have had 7 summits with the president. Usually the summits are only 2 or none at all.
Yep.
So even the national government realized that preparedness is necessary. We have to have a dialogue with them. So in terms of emergency, nobody will ever be prepared for an emergency. Emergencies are emergencies by their very nature. You can never be prepared fully for them. But one thing we have learned is that at least there should be certain institutions, both at the county level and national level, which deal with emergency preparedness, which will have to put in place certain measures to deal with any emergency which come when they don't want anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
How should those be coordinated? For example, when you talk about now emergencies, at the national level, there has been talk forever. In fact, there's been a bill in the National Assembly on National Disaster Management Authority. And, how that could then be scaled down into the counties. Is this a conversation that is now being revived, or is it just, one of those conversations that happen in boardrooms, but practically it doesn't move? And why is it that it doesn't move?
The conversations have always been there because Kenya, as you know, ever since independence, has dealt with many emergencies. The first one was the Shifter War, which people didn't know it was coming, and it took the government I would say with its pants down then.
Yeah.
But finally, measures were found to deal with the Shifter War, and it was dealt with. And the country settled back to what may have been normal. After that, there are many other emergencies that have occurred. Floods, for example, in the case of Nyeri region, floods have been a perpetual menace to the county. But fortunately, this time, we are building the Nakuru multi-purpose dam, which has been in the books since 1951 in colonial times. Finally, it's being put in place, and that will deal with the issue of floods, perhaps much more comprehensively. So, what am I saying? Why am I saying these things? I'm saying this thing because there is no one theory from which we can draw and find a methodology of dealing with emergencies globally. There's no one theory. Yeah. So there will always be a problem in emergencies, by the way.
It's true, but Prof, I think you're just...
Be it locust, be it thunderstorm, be it whatever. But all I'm saying, there must be institutions in place that deal with emergencies. That is why that emergency and disaster bill was mooted in Parliament. That's why many counties like mine, for example, have emergency or county disaster bills or laws. And we set up departments to deal with disaster management. Because we know that there's one disaster we have to deal with every year, that is flooding. Fortunately, now we will not have to deal with it in the same way, but that doesn't mean that the Department of Disaster Management will fold up.
Prof, you speak very well, and you speak very well in terms of, in theory, like you said, these are things that you cannot anticipate, but also these are things that you ought to have institutions that would be able to respond swiftly. So why is it that we don't have them? Why is it that we still have situations where at the national level we have floods ravaging people in the country, we have early warning systems, we have an institution like the Kenya Meteorological Department that's been there for long, but we still are not very good at responding to disasters? Why is that?
I wish you could ask that of the American government, for example. Why is it the U.S. government has never been able to deal with fires in California every summer? Okay, why? Yes, it's a highly technological society. It has very good meteorological services and so on. Why? I mean, it would be very interesting if you could get an answer from that in the U.S. Then I can answer it.
Indeed. It's the nature of it. But you see, Prof.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. Believe you me, that the reason why we cannot have a complete solution to emergencies, because every time they come with new dimensions. Even flooding doesn't take place in the same way. You cannot lock up your resources, lock, stock, and barrel, and say these resources are locked up here, they're waiting to deal with emergencies. That's not very good economics. So what you do with the scarce resources you have, you use for doing other things, and in the case that emergency strikes, you do your best to deal with it. So there are always scarce resources in dealing with emergencies in any part of the world, including the U.S.
Indeed, that's true. In fact, if we look also at the kind of emergency that we're dealing with now, the COVID-19 emergency, and how counties responded in the beginning, there has been a very drastic improvement in how the governments have responded. However, we are at a position here now, about 8 months down the road, where we are seeing an increase in the number of people who are seeking hospitalization, but counties are running short of beds. Is it because of the nature of the evolving nature of this pandemic, or is it some lack of capacity somewhere? Maybe financial capacity, maybe technical capacity.
I wish you read the stories. I wish you read the stories of how the Italians, the British have been dealing with COVID. Everybody's running short of beds, by the way. Not just Kisumu, not that in Siolo, not that in Mombasa. The very nature of this emergency is that you are likely to run short of beds anytime, because you don't know from day to day how many people are going to need those beds the next day. Today there may be 2, tomorrow there may be 100, because nobody knows how these things strike people. Nobody, including Dr. Fauci in the U.S.
But the one thing you do know, for example, is that it could be. So in terms of preparedness and saying, could we have some extra? I think that's the question now. In terms of making sure that just hold on so I can ask the question. In terms of making sure that there is availability, should something happen, is it not possible to put those in place? And anybody around the world could ask that question. But since we're in Kenya now asking the questions about how it affects Kenyans, isn't it possible to have something to fall back on, because you don't know what would happen tomorrow?
But let me tell you that. I will tell you that the counties and national government have responded pretty well to this thing, given the dimensions. I will tell you, from where I stand in Kisumu, we have responded very well. We have not been overwhelmed by bodies like elsewhere. But the point is, even those emergency beds you're talking about, they must be bought from the market. And a time comes when they are not there to be bought, not because we cannot afford them, but they are not just there in enough numbers to serve everybody.
So let's look at now, just as we move the conversation into in Naivasha this morning, Prof, with the other governors, you're discussing BBI. The last time we spoke with you here, it was before the release of the BBI report. Now the report is out, and that's why the governors are meeting today, and you expect to host the president and the ODM leader. Some of the reports that are coming out of there is that there is consensus on some areas, and there is sort of some differences that are emerging, even amongst yourselves in some areas. What are your prospects of seeing some proper consensus building, not just among the governors, but among the other interest groups as well, as we head towards a referendum?
The prospects are very good. The discussions are very healthy. The differences are being ironed out, because they help to explain better what needs to be improved in the BBI report. And I think yesterday we had a wonderful day. I think we're going to have a wonderful day with the Prime Minister today. I think we had very productive discussions. I think we realized the kind of things that people didn't understand well or have not put properly in the BBI. I think we have drafted these proposals to the BBI team. I hope they will take them into consideration, and I'm quite sure that when we go to referendum, we are likely to have a higher consensus than expected before.
Okay. But my worry, though, Prof, and I've got to say this, is as these conversations are happening, for example, the Council of Governors has enough muscle to sit down and even welcome the former Prime Minister and the President to a table and have the conversation. How about the other interest groups that may not have enough muscle to even get the ear of the principals or the task force, and maybe they have issues that they'd like addressed? For example, persons with disabilities, they had a press conference some time back and they were raising issues about what's contained in the BBI report. Where would their place be in voicing their concerns and getting their grievances addressed?
Mind you, even among the Council of Governors, we deal with issues of persons with disability. I think I would say myself that even before the issue of persons with disability became broad national conversation, as a member of parliament myself, I was responsible for promoting a lot of issues with persons with disability. You may have to have a conversation with Isaac Maura, he will tell you.
Yep.
And I think that among the Council of Governors, there are counties where issues to do with persons with disability have been put center to in this conversation, and opportunities have been made available at the county level for these conversations to be brought within what we as governors are doing, so that we don't wait for persons with the ability to raise the issues themselves. But I think we as representatives of these people with county ability must also take up these issues. And I know yesterday, for example, some of those issues were ventilated during our discussion.
Governor Nyang' Nyong'o, we thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. We hope even after this meeting we'll be able to invite you again and we can expound on some of these conversations.
Thank you so much, man. Have a good day.
You too. Have a good day. Time for us to take a break on KTN Home and say goodbye. Join us again tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. It's now 7 minutes to 9. This conversation happens each and every morning on Spice FM, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. My name is Eric Latif. We have in the room Nduoko and CT Muga. See you tomorrow, KTN Home.
Spice FM, Nyeri.
All right, it's 7 minutes to 9. The recovery strategy by the counties, they've got to be, distilled by each county. And then each county then comes up with its own programs and plans. What faith do you have in seeing counties actually reacting and responding in good time? Because response is something, but you're in an emergency and you expect a response now. People are suffering today.
Emergency by definition doesn't give you time doesn't give you time to take your time. It's something that needs to be done now. It's something that needs to be effective. It's something that needs to be felt. And it's something that needs to be a reality for many people when the response to this emergency is actually taking place. We've said many times here that the implementation of this thing, it looks fantastic. I'm sure it's been embossed. It looks great in terms of a strategy on paper. But the implementation of the same, for the people per county to feel that something's actually being done, because it's here now. It's not something that it'll wait for tomorrow for these things to actually come to fruition. There's money that's involved. There are think tanks that are involved. There are people who have to be the runners to make sure this whole thing comes together. Is it being done? Will it be done? Or is it something nice that we can present and have a lunch and a ribbon cutting, and then after that, what happens? I mean, let's just be very serious here. For me, I have faith that it's great in the way it looks. About the faith that I have in the implementation of the same, that's a bit shaky. I must be honest.
That the idea was actually brought into being and that it's being discussed is a positive step.
Sure, yes.
And that the county governors saw it as something that needs to be thought of is positive. But even as we talk of emergencies, the very nature of emergencies we've understood. But when these same emergencies occur every year, like floods or like landslides, we even know the areas where they occur. Surely there must be some minimal plan, and that plan needs to be cleared as this is what we plan to do when this happens. Because it isn't as though, with the exception of this backflow that we're talking about that is happening to our lakes or our water bodies, there needs to be a plan that one can talk about and discuss about evacuation, because that's probably what you need to do. And with the evacuation, the medical plans that are in place.
The support for everybody else.
That really is the discussion, because this is what they call an act of God. There's nothing you can do about it.
Well, I mean,
but there's something you can do to allay the consequences.
Sure. Even like with the California wildfires that the Prof talked about, they know that they will happen next year as the summer months beckon. However, you already know, and we can actually find it online, for example, what the government of California has already put in place, because they cannot control the fires. They will come. But they are aware after so many years that this is an occurrence naturally. How can they do that? They're encouraging more and more builders in the real estate sector in California to build with a fire-resistant material, so that it doesn't destroy to the level in which it has done before. They've already put evacuation plans into place so that as these fires come, we're asking you to move out of the areas in advance of time. You already know, and they already know who will move to where, because they know that they will have to fight the fire. They cannot get rid of it because of the warming temperatures. They know. However, have they put in plans in place so that Californians know what they're supposed to be doing at a particular point in time, so that when the announcement comes from government that here we are dealing with these fires, you know where to go, you know what to do, and you know how fast you're supposed to do it. It's already in place now as we speak. This is what I'm talking about. You can't control the disaster, but you can control your response. And you know what you're supposed to do in a position of emergency. And that's what I'm saying even now. It should be in place. And I think there's been an admittance that you know that these management boards are in place, but they're sitting like lame ducks because they know that they're there as a disaster management authority, for example, but what can they really do?
But there's also the mindset that anything that is of that particular nature has for the longest time been the province of the national government. So even when there is talk about the county governments doing this thing, the active mindset is that someone else ought to be sorting it out.
Somebody else will take care of it. At the national level, there's some level of NGOs involvement. So this one, the Red Cross will come in. Let's see which other development
Somebody
partner
will
come help us to give us food, to give us tents, to give us medical aid. MSF, whichever MSF, Spain, Belgium, whatever, they'll be on the ground to inoculate children. It's expecting that there's somebody else who is going to support you.
And we'll just stand next to them and give a presser.
Yes. And what we'll do, we'll have a very good document on how then they can coordinate who they should be calling when they're on the ground. That the person in charge of disasters on the ground is the district commissioner. This is what we see, or the county commissioner nowadays. This is what we see all the time. And these are conversations that we need to be moving away from and have a proper structure put in place. It's good that now the recovery and re-engineering strategy for the counties, governments is mentioning this. We need to see a lot more of this happening. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We have these kind of conversations every morning. So in the next hour, let's remind you about how you can get your business more visible by going digital. So we have been taught lessons by COVID-19. We've seen how businesses have been impacted by COVID-19, but we've also seen the opportunities that have been presented by COVID-19. And so we've partnered with Google, and we want to teach you how and train you how then you can move your business online. So the Google expert, Rosemary Mumanyi Opio, will be joining us for the first 20 minutes. If you've got any questions for Rosemary, 0719-012-600 is the number to call. That's 0719-012-600. Or Spice FM KE on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, or Instagram. She'll be responding to those questions right there. Then after that, we cross over into Zambia and why they have some serious debt issues. Good morning. It's now 9 o'clock.
Spice up your life. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Okay, so if you're using what Jogo Road this morning, guys who are on Jogo Road are asking you that if you don't have to, work from home, because it's an absolute mess this morning. If you haven't left home yet and you're able to work from home today, please do that. It's not moving. And as you approach the City Stadium roundabouts, there are puddles of water. Many have referred to this morning as a lake of water, and so you're being advised, don't get in until, if you're going at full speed, please be very careful. The Maimahiu situation still continues outside of the city. Kilometers of traffic there this morning, coming out of Westlands as well. You can use the Red Hill bypass. That's an option for you to get round further, yes, but you won't be stuck in traffic, okay? Also, Mombasa Road moving still quite slowly all the way to General Motors, and then after that towards the Nyeri Stadium roundabout, Uhuru Highway. Now that's another story. It's moving very slowly from the Nyeri Stadium roundabout all through to Westlands, very, very slowly this morning. So Monday traffic jam has moved to Tuesday, and I hope we can get out of this one alive, guys. Okay, Spice of MKE, tell us where you might be stuck. Would at least keep you company or give you an alternate route, right? Also text 40127.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room.
After 9, this is Kenya's biggest conversation. As we begin this new hour, C.T. Muga, what is today's proverb?
Right. Gold should be sold to the one who knows the value of it.
Gold should be sold to the one who knows the value of it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sawa sawa. And the export compensation should be paid to who?
To the expert.
The one who knows the value of the export compensation.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Haya, ni sawa basi. Ni sawa ende. Tumekubali. Kama hivyo ndio umesema. Tumekubali. Now let's talk about business and getting your business online. Our expert from Google is on the line, Rosemary Momanyi Apio. Today, we also want to encourage you, if you've got any question on how you can get your business onto the Google platform. So far, we've talked about Google My Business and how you can use it, how you can create this one-page profile that you can put your contacts, you can put even your location directly linking it to the Google Maps, how you can even link your own website. If you have a website, then you can link it to the website using the Google My Business. So when someone comes and searches a keyword that is associated to your business or your business, then you appear right there at the top of the search results. And then someone can then either call you directly, they can review some of the content that you posted, including pictures or description of the goods or services that you offer. They can even look at the reviews of what other people have said about your business from satisfied and dissatisfied customers. And they can also come to your website and learn more. This is a very important thing. So yesterday, we took a couple of questions, and let's see if we've got any more questions today. But also, Rosemary is going to be teaching us a little bit more. Rosemary, good morning.
Good morning, Eric. How are you?
I am fine, thank you.
Morning, City. Morning, Do. How are you all today?
Good morning,
We are
Rosemary.
well, thank you.
Doing well.
Super.
All right. So as we wait for more questions to come in, probably can move on into what else you'd like us to know about the platforms that or the tools that are available on Google.
Absolutely. So I'm going to take you to the Google Hub or the SME Hub.
Okay.
And how to get here, there are two ways. You can either type in g.co/Grow Africa, or an easy way or cheeky way out is just type in on the Google search bar, Rise Up Google, and you'll come to this page.
All right, say that again. G.co
// Grow Africa.
All right.
Yeah, that's one option.
Okay.
Another cheeky way is to just type in Rise Up Google, and you'll come here as well.
Rise Up Google, it will bring in search results.
Yes, and you just click on the one that says Rise Up.
All right.
And you can come here.
Okay. So what is this?
So now this is what we're calling our Grow 2.0 hub, or our Rise Up Africa hub. And it's a platform that is developed for businesses, for individuals, and for people who own a classroom, so students and teachers. So for the next few weeks, I'll focus on just the piece around businesses. And I want to just highlight to you the fact that we have 3 tabs here. And these 3 tabs were informed or created because we had done some research to understand how can we be more helpful to SMEs in Africa. And 3 need states came up. Number 1, they need access to customers because ultimately that will help them grow and get money. Number 2, they need tools and services. And these are things like GMB, Market Finder, and I'll walk you through what those tools and services are. And then number 3, they need access to finance. Now, while we don't have money as Google to offer them financing like we would if we were a bank, we have partnered with various banks across the continent to help us address that piece around access to finance. So I'll highlight to you who are the key partners in Kenya. But for today, we'll focus on the first piece, which is get customers. And so if I click on this tab here, it shows me what tools are available to help an SME across Africa, or in this case, Kenya, get customers. So the first tool, I'll go through right now high-level overview, and then I'll dive deeper into each of those tools over the next few days. So the first tool is a marketing kit. Now this tool is a tool that is developed specifically to help an SME be able to create for themselves marketing assets. So normally, if you're an SME, you'd have to pay a creative agency to help you build, whether it's posters or banners, or if you have the skill set yourself, you can do them. But that would require you upskilling yourself on what tools are available to help you create those banners and posters. So in this case, the marketing kit was developed specifically for SMEs as a free tool to help them create custom posters that they can then use to create social posts and be able to highlight reviews or highlight if they're offering any offerings or launching new products. So it's a very powerful kit that allows you to help create for yourself the posters and the stickers that you can either print as a hard copy or post online to build for yourself more awareness. That's the first tool.
Okay.
The second tool is a tool that we launched recently called Market Finder. Now this tool is interesting because if you're an SME and you have products that you can be able to export, like in this case, Wangare has organic soap that you'd like to export to new markets, and she doesn't know where to start. So with this tool, she's able to type in her business profile or her website. The tool will then go through and say, oh, Wangare, you're selling organic soap. We've seen similar keywords for people looking for organic soap in the US, in Germany, or in Japan. And here's how big the opportunity is in those markets. Here are your top 3 countries, and here's how big the opportunity is in those 3 markets. And if you wanted to begin exporting your products to these 3 markets, here's who you can partner with along the journey, whether it's a DHL or a G4S, but basically who you can leverage to help you get from point A to your new market.
Wait, so all this information is actually provided in that particular tool?
Yes.
So it will be able even to tell me, so I'd be able to see the potential markets outside the country.
Correct.
And I'd be able to see who I can use, for example, logistics companies.
Exactly.
Do I get to know the export requirements, for instance, what I need to know, the permits that I need to acquire?
So you'll find links to partners who can give you that info because it'll be unique to every SME.
Okay.
So you'll be able to see here's who to reach out to help you understand the tax requirements, the export requirements, the costs, etc. You find details there on whom to partner with that will then help answer your questions on the requirements. So we'll go into that tool as well over the next few days.
Okay.
And then this one you guys are experts on, CT, Eric can do. It's GMB. As you all know, it's the first tool to help you grow your online awareness.
Yeah.
And then the other tools that are also available across Africa are Google Ads. So we'll spend some time in those tools. What's beautiful about this time frame is that we just launched incentive coupons in Kenya, and very soon you'll see the link to Kenya here. But basically, it will allow an SME to create their first ad campaign and have Google co-sponsor them in building their first campaign for the first month.
What does that mean?
So it's already live in. So yes, so good question. So that means if you have, in this case, 5,000 shillings, for example, as an SME, we will top up with another 5,000 shillings as Google, so that your first month you'll be able to spend 10,000 shillings on your first ad campaign. It's been live in South Africa and in Nigeria, but now it will be live in Kenya. And very soon you'll see the link here for Kenya. That helps an SME understand that if you want to have your first campaign to help you build even more awareness, Google will match your spend up to 5,000 shillings in your first month.
What do you need to do to be able to qualify for that? Does it, everybody who steps up to the plate gets this offer, Rosemary?
Yes. So if you're an SME and you want to have your first campaign, we'd require you to at the very least have a landing page. And that can be your business profile, right? If you don't have a website, because you're required to have traffic come to some place. So we're saying at the very least have a business profile. It's free, right? And then create your first ad, and we'll top that up and match it 50% up to 5,000 shillings in your first month. Yes, so that's all you require is a landing page, and that could be a business profile. That way you don't invest anything beyond just having an online presence.
Okay.
So those are the insights or the tools that are available to help an SME get customers, right? And then the other tab here is around what are the other tools and services. So I think you guys are experts already about business GMB. So we walk the SMEs through the journey and the step-by-step journey on having a business profile.
Okay.
We also highlight partners who have been able to create profiles like Wangare. But over and above the profiles, we discussed this before, e-commerce. E-commerce is quite big to SMEs today, and for them, it's all about enabling them to be able to buy and sell products online. So we have various tools, like in this case, e-commerce tools to help an SME get a free e-commerce website, to help them be able to receive and make payments online. So those are also the other tools that are available for the SME.
Okay.
And then the third tab, sorry, go ahead, Andu.
Well, I think it's interesting that you brought that up, because that was one of the questions that came through in terms of e-commerce as an aspect on the Google page or your business profile. Is it possible to set that up on your profile where that people can see prices and actually buy directly from your business profile landing page? As it were?
Not on the business profile, but we can link to a website that has that enabled.
Okay.
So the purpose is very much, here's your one-stop shop. And if you want to go e-commerce, click here. So we can be able to link out to your e-commerce store from your business profile.
Okay. And also the next one, then, in terms of support and hand-holding for all of this, because you may start out very simply, start with your business profile and the basics that you need to do. But then as you're going more, more in depth, like some of the things you've mentioned now, e-commerce and then your Google ads or things like that, in terms of back-end support, how vibrant would that be? Is there somebody that you can pick up the phone and talk to or send an email to, and there'll always be somebody to help?
Yes. So right now we're offering for the first month, at the very least, it's available for you for free. So you reach out to our partner, Africa 118. They'll help you set up your Google Ads campaign, and they'll be there throughout the whole month, holding your hand, but at the same time upskilling you. That way, month 2, and when you take it over yourself, you now know how to build your ads, how to support it. But if you still require support, they're only a phone call away. So we are here throughout the journey to help you onboard your capacity or help you upskill yourself, but then available to you to help answer any of your questions as they come along over the month 2 or month 3, etc.
Okay. I know you want to go to another tab, some information, but another question is that...
Please go ahead, yeah.
Must my business then be registered with government, for example, in order for me to have a business profile created?
Good question, Joe. So we are requiring an SME to, at the very least, be paying the government something. So if you live in Nairobi, you'll be paying Nairobi City Council taxes. If you are registered, then of course you're paying KRA. So for us to verify you need to, at the very least, be legitimate and either be paying taxes to the county that you're in, or if you're registered, be able to prove that you have a registered business.
Wait, many people would have assumed that, taking my business online means that I don't have a premise and therefore I don't need to pay Kanjo.
You don't have to, but at least until you register your name somewhere, did you register your name somewhere, and you have to pay for that name registration, so you have a receipt from that.
Right, okay.
If you can give us that the receipt,
or PIN number,
so
for
that you
example.
truly, exactly, PIN number, that receipt for registration for your name of your business,
Okay.
or if you have a physical store, if you're paying some county taxes, so whatever you have that can prove that truly you own this company, or so this is yours, or this is yours. We just need to prove that truly it belongs to you. That's what we require to prove that.
All right.
So you can take us through one more tab as we
One more
conclude
tab.
today's conversation.
Yeah, the final tab is really the piece around access to finance.
Okay.
And here we're saying that ultimately we are not a bank as Google, but we have partners who have access to multiple platforms. So what we do is we have partners across Kenya, across Africa, who are able to provide the financing needs to SMEs. So we have, in this case, EcoBank, we have Standard Bank, we have Diamond Trust Bank. So we list the whole gamut of who our partners are, that an SME can then go to. For example, I'll click on this one, Possessia. An SME can then come here and then apply for microfinance support from Possessia in this example. So that way we're able to walk them through saying, fine, if you want financing, here are our partners, and here's how you can be able to apply for a loan with Possessia in this example. Yeah. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions. Go ahead,
Does
Eric.
it tell me how much, what the interest rates would be, for example, with some of those partners?
Yeah. So I'm going to just go down the journey again. I'll pick Possessia. I'll select I'm in Kenya. And then I go through a form that they require me to be able to fill to be able to be assessed on my eligibility criteria.
Okay.
So I'll fill this information here. I'll hit submit to get funded. And then I'll receive a phone call from a rep from this company who will say, Rose, you applied for this financing. Here, want to verify some information from you. If you qualify, here's your qualification amount. That way, it will be unique for every SME, but it will be based on their criteria, what they're asking for. And of course, they will have to go through the screening that's already been put in place by, in this case, Possessia, to qualify me for the financing requirement.
So the assumption here is that Google has already done the background checks on Possessia, so I can trust Possessia.
You can trust Possessia, yes.
Okay.
Because if you can see the first page is basically them saying that we're working with Google to help support SMEs. And then you pick your country, you're in Kenya, Ghana, or other, and then you'll go through the onboarding process to qualify for a loan with Possessia or financing through Possessia.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Rosemary, thank you very much for joining us today. Again, all the conversations that we have with Rosemary every morning are also uploaded on our YouTube channel. This is Spice FM KE, and you'll find them under the tab Grow Your Business with Google and Grow Your Business with Google. All the conversations that we have on a daily basis. So just for you to go and refresh what information we've shared, and we urge you to take advantage of this. Just go to google.africa118.co.ke. You'll get in touch get the contacts of the Africa 118 team. Get in touch with them, let them help you set up this, particularly just the Google My Business page, and then they can take you through the training for everything else that we've been talking about with Rosemary about taking your business online. Rosemary, speak to you again tomorrow.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Asante sana.
Okay.
18 minutes after 9. Let's now take a break, see what's happening in the skies, in the weather.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life. Spice up your life.
At 17 degrees, it's
The
still
what?
mostly cloudy in Nairobi. We'll see highs of 23 today and lows of 16. Mostly cloudy in Nakuru. 24 the high and lows of 15. Partly sunny conditions in Nyeri at 19. They go to a high of 23 today. The high will be 22 in Eldoret, where it's partly sunny right now at 16. Mostly sunny conditions in Kisumu at 23. Warming up to 28 and lows of 19 today. Sunny conditions in Kakamega throughout today. Highs of 27. Highs of 27 also in Mombasa, where it's currently raining and coming down to a low of 24. It's mostly sunny in Malindi at 29. The high for today. Mostly sunny conditions in Kampala at 21, going to highs of 25 and lows of 18. In Dar es Salaam at 29, that'll be the high today. It's experiencing light rain right now throughout. And rain showers also in Johannesburg at 16 degrees, going to highs of 21 and lows of 13. Light rain in Lagos, still the order of the day. Highs of 31 today. And we'll see Kinshasa continuing with the rain throughout, with highs of 32. Sunny conditions in Beijing at 17. And that will be the high today, coming down then to lows of 1. Rain showers continue in Paris, going to highs of 15 and lows of 10. And in London, 12 degrees, highs of 15 and lows of 9. And finally, for now, it's now Tuesday morning in New York. It's going to be a warm day, uncharacteristically so at this time of the year. However, highs of 20 and lows of 16.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
It's now 21 minutes after 9. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room. We broadcast this on every morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Spice FM, 7 to 9. We are also on KTN Home, but we're also online throughout the show. Spice FM KE on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and spicefm.co.ke. So let's come back to the issue of what's happening in Africa, and this is in terms of debt. So there has been a story about Zambia. A 30-day grace period for Zambia to settle the coupon it missed on its 2024 note ends in the middle of November. This is Africa's second largest copper exporter. This is a story that has been unfolding, and one of the journalists that has been following this up is Ramanyang. He's a journalist with the Bloomberg and CGT, and this is China Global Television Network. And if we just piggyback on the conversation that we were having earlier on Kenya and what we were calling a looming debt crisis, and then now you see, so we get to Zambia, and they are at a position where what they're finding is, first, they were supposed to have remitted some money, and they missed that. Now they've been given until mid-November. They're trying to have a conversation on what should happen. The bigger question is, if then Zambia defaults, how concerned should the rest of Africa or sub-Saharan Africa be about the contagion effect? Is there likely to be a contagion effect? Let's bring in our guests. This is Ramanyang. Good morning, Rama.
Morning, Eric. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Good to have you in the show. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much. It's a place I worked at many years ago, well, the parent company anyway, so it is interesting.
It's the same building, Rama.
Same building, same company. Yeah. Anyway, talk to me. What's up?
Indeed. So, just give us a brief about the Zambia situation. What is it that's happening in Zambia? What happened?
Okay, so Zambia was, for a very long period of time, one of the darlings of the Eurobond market. They were among the initial wave, if you will, of African countries that went into the international credit market and said, hey, we'd like to borrow some money, long-term, usually 7, 5, 10 years. And the markets responded pretty well. So they borrowed, as of now, roughly $3 billion. And the problem that they're facing at the moment is that they have borrowed all this money. And the premise was, well, we're in the middle of a commodity boom. A lot more people are importing our copper, and copper is the biggest single exporter, the second largest exporter of that particular commodity. And the underlying assumption was that copper revenues would just keep going up and up and up and up. And they would therefore have the money they need to continue servicing these Eurobonds that they issued. Problem is that didn't work out as planned. So they missed a payment on their 2024 Eurobond.
Mm-hmm.
That was about $42.5 million that was supposed to actually go out. And the problem now is that the way these Eurobonds contracts, if you will, are structured, if you miss a payment, you get a grace period of, say, 30 days. And that 30-day window ends on the 13th of November.
Mm-hmm.
So unless they can find that $42.5 million between now and November 13th, they're basically in the hole. And that comes with all sorts of issues.
Rama, what are we talking about here? When we say missed a payment, it's not, we're not talking at national level now for a country. Are we saying that, they've gotten 22.5, for example, they're looking for 20? Or the situation is so bad that they've not been able to get any of it at all. And it's not that we need a little bit more time, it's that it's bad, we don't have it. What are we looking at?
Essentially, that's it. We don't have the money. So if you look at the reserves, you could look at the reserves and say, yeah, but they could just take the money out of the reserves, what reserves they do have, and pay off their creditors again or holding the Eurobonds. But the fundamental problem with that is that you're basically leaving them even more vulnerable to other financial shocks. If you look at their currency, I know in Kenya we've been complaining about the Kenya shilling moving from 100 to 108, 109 in some cases on the interbank market. Zambia, the kwacha has moved from 10 to the dollar. It's almost at 21 to the dollar now. So that's a 50% shift in barely a year, which is insane. It will be the equivalent of the shilling moving from 100 to 200. Almost 200 shilling. Now, you can imagine the inflation effects pass-through that you have just from that. It's chaotic. You don't want to have that. So Zambia's in a pretty hard place because remember the same things that we're seeing here with when you introduce restrictions on movement, you're trying to limit movement to deal with this pandemic. So people are working fewer hours, they're making less money, businesses are cutting jobs. What that means for you as from a macro level is that you're a finance minister, and if you expected $10 billion to come through in tax revenue, you're now looking at 8 or 7 or $6 billion. So you have to do a lot more, for lack of a better word, with a smaller pot of money. And in this instance, what they've decided, what they basically went and told Eurobond holders was, listen, we have other priorities, so you guys will have to wait. How did it get here? I asked this question because then it shines a light then on how easy it will be for other countries to get here. How did they get to the point whereby you're getting this credit on whatever platform you're getting it, and then you're getting to the point whereby unable to pay, unable to finance this? How did this happen? A combination of things. Hubris is usually right at the top of it. The thing we have to remember is that if you go back to let's go back to 2008, right? Global financial crisis. So banks decide, central banks around the world decide, you know what, we need to make credit as cheap as possible. So they drive down the effective rates you can find on bonds in other markets, in the UK, in the US, in Germany, in France, and so on and so forth. Now, the net effect of that is if you're a bond manager or fund manager in the UK, in the US, or wherever, essentially what that means is you're sitting on, say, a portfolio of, 20, 30, $100 billion, and you're looking for yield. And all you're going to find is, if you go into the bond market in your domestic country, you're going to find people are saying, well, we're going to lend money to you 10 years at, say, 2%. You're barely making a return. Then along comes a country like Zambia or Kenya or Ghana, and they say, we'll borrow from you 10 years, but we'll pay you 8% or 9% or 10%. It's a very attractive proposition. So on one hand, you've got people who want to lend money because they're looking for yields, and that cash was there, it was available. And then on the other end of the equation, you've got all these African countries that are coming up with interesting growth stories. They need to invest in infrastructure. So for a long time, it looked like this was a match made in heaven. The problem was, at least on our end, as African countries, we tended to premise this borrowing on one never-ending growth, which is not ever going to be realistic in the first place, and Kenya is making essentially the same mistake. We also premised it on the assumption that the prices of commodities would remain high perpetually forever, which is not the case. And Zambia made those two key mistakes. So eventually, when the cows came home, proverbially speaking, they were in trouble.
Let me ask this question. Given that Zambia isn't the first country on the planet to have such a problem, what happens when you actually default?
Okay, so first of all, you get essentially you might have what they call cross default clauses in your debt contracts, which partly explains why Kenya didn't go into the debt service relief initiative that was offered by the G20. Because the instant I say, okay, Eric, I borrowed money from you, but I'm not going to pay you because I'm having some sort of financial distress.
Yeah.
In some instances, other creditors can come in and say, hey, we want our money back, all of it, right now, which is a problem. So essentially, it would mean, like in Zambia's case, if now you missed this $42.5 million payment, does it therefore mean that the rest of your $3 billion of outstanding Eurobond debt is now immediately callable?
Yeah.
That's something we're still trying to figure out because I haven't gone through all the Eurobond contracts, but it's a risk. It also essentially would mean that you'd be locked out of future, of essentially credit markets in the future, because once you've proven that you're an unreliable lender, or rather an unreliable borrower, why would anyone lend money to you again? Which is deeply problematic. Now, it's not quite as bad as what Zimbabwe right next to is facing, but it's kind of close, because at that point in time, if you've already defaulted on commercial loans, if you approach any other multilateral institution or a commercial bank or syndicated facility, they'll tell you, yeah, but you didn't pay these guys. Why should we lend you money?
What do countries use to secure these loans? I mean, apart from just their good record and their credit rating, what else do they use to secure these loans?
You're touching on the heart of something else that right in the middle of the dispute Zambia is having right now with Eurobond creditors. Because essentially, when you're lending as a country, or rather, when you're borrowing as a country, you're not ostensibly saying, hey, listen, in case I default, I will give you X. Because that raises a certain level of concerns about sovereignty. And the problem right now, at least in the global credit market, is that a lot of people remember what happened to Sri Lanka when they borrowed a lot of money from China. And eventually, when they couldn't pay back most of it or service it properly, China eventually got a lease on a port, I think on the southern end of the island, it's called Hapatuta.
Yep.
And one of the main concerns that keep coming up when you talk to guys who actually bought into these Eurobonds is why are we, as Eurobond holders, being told that we should essentially not take this money, we should be essentially last in line, but are we getting the same treatment as bilateral lenders as well? If you're not treating all of us, the argument is this, if you're not treating all of us at the same way, on the same level, then realistically, there's a problem. Either we all get treated the same, therefore we all don't take payment, or we essentially just blow this whole thing up and say, sour. Right? If we're not getting paid, no one else gets paid.
No one should get paid.
Okay, so we're getting to the time where November 13th is 3 days away.
Yeah,
right? It's 2 days from where we are now. Suffice to say that probably nationally they're looking at staring down the barrel of the gun at this point. But what essentially, so 13th comes, you miss the payment, it's not going to happen. And right now negotiations are going on for reprieve of such. What is the likelihood that the reprieve will be given?
Not likely.
Okay.
Not likely. The Eurobond holders that we've spoken to are basically saying, look, one, there's a lack of transparency, because one of the things that has always hovered around Zambia, and one of the reasons why everyone's been viewing this as a question of when, not if, was that Zambia wasn't 100% transparent with the amount of debt that they have on their books, where they sourced it from, and at what cost.
Okay.
So, for instance, in the same way that here we had our legislators have to hold hearings in order to figure out some of the basic details around the SGR contract.
Yep.
How much did you borrow? At what price? How was that particular loan structured? Was it commercial? Was it non-commercial? Zambia has that, but supersized. So the problem now is that Eurobond holders are saying, hang on, you want us to just sit back and take you at your word and say, okay, yeah, sure, it's fine. Yeah, you're in the middle of a crisis. We'll give you some time to get your things in order. But are you treating us the same way as China? How much debt do you have relative to China? How much have you borrowed from them? How much, at what terms, what rates? Those are things that they still have not been told to date. And all that the finance minister has said so far is, and I'm quoting him here because this is what he said, he told Reuters yesterday, we're doing everything possible the discussions with bondholders on a continuous basis. But there's such a lack of detail. Exactly. There's such a lack of detail. Euro bondholders are just looking at this and saying, boss, you're not serious.
But is there a level playing field within which those who lend money treat those who've borrowed? For instance, like in 2015 when Greece defaulted on their debt. Is this the manner in which they were treated? There was restructuring of the loans, etc., etc. I'm asking, when third world countries default on their loans, are they given similar treatment, or does that depend on the details of the contract that they got themselves into?
So there's two answers to that. It depends, one, on the contract that you entered into. So if a government has not made the full nature of those contracts public, you've got a problem. Because you might have inadvertently signed up to a clawback clause or an immediate payment clause in case of a cross default, and your taxpayers, essentially your employers, do not know. So it's the equivalent of your husband has basically mortgaged the house, he defaults on it, you wake up in the morning and you find auctioneers at the gate, and you're wondering, hey, why are you taking my house? Legally, the auctioneers are right. Your husband signed away the rights. But here's the other side of it. The IMF, the problem that we're confronting now, unlike the last debt relief initiative that we had in the early 2000s with HIBIC, the challenge we're facing now is that if you look at the composition of debt that a lot of countries like us and Ghana and Zambia are holding, is that in the year 2000, a big chunk of it was either bilateral debts or we owed money to the IMF and the World Bank. Right? So it was fairly straightforward to get all these guys in the room and say, this is the problem, this is how we're going to solve it out. Today, you've got so many more players. So in Kenya's case, like a third of our debt is commercial. So that's a mix of Eurobonds, which gets a lot of attention. There's another part of it that doesn't get a lot of attention, which is a lot of commercial syndicated debt from the likes of Trade and Development Bank and so on and so forth. Then, of course, you've got your bilateral sources of debt, your Chinese, your French, your Japanese, and so on and so forth. And you've got the multilateral development institutions, ADB, IMF, World Bank, and so on. Now, dealing with a combination of the World Bank and the IMF plus some of the G20 guys, the Paris Club members, that's fairly straightforward because we've been here before. The difference now is that you've got China, which is our biggest single bilateral lender. We owe them something like $6.8 billion as of end June. And then you've got this massive amount of money that we owe in commercial loans. So between those two, they've got widely different methods of dealing with default. And that is where the problem is, because it isn't immediately clear in the event of a default or even debt distress, because now we're essentially at relatively moderate to high distress, depending on which triggers you want to look at. In the event of a default, it's not clear how you would actually restructure that debt facility that you hold to all these different individual creditors. And that's the problem.
Okay.
It sounds like, one of those that the dominoes just start falling and they don't stop until the final one just drops, eh?
Because it's very hard to get off the train once you've gotten it, get on top of it. Because now we are at, let's see, if you just look at what our debt service is costing us as a percentage of what we're raising in taxes, you're basically close to 49%, looking at the last reports from the Parliamentary Budget Office.
Yep.
So for every 100 shillings we're getting, about 49 of that is just going to service a combination of principal and interest costs for local and foreign debt. Now, we're in the middle of this crazy pandemic where people are losing jobs, people are working fewer hours, businesses are downsizing. So the available tax revenue is just shrinking. The walls are closing in on us. And if we don't get ahead of this, we've got a problem.
But the problem here, as I see it, is that, Zambia is one country, but the other countries who are in similar problems and have been since this year began. We're talking about Argentina, Ecuador, Lebanon. Now, let me ask the question. There are those who do the sort of ratings for these things, people like Fitch. Are they called Fitch? Fitch rating? Now,
Fitch, S&P, and a few others.
Yes, they, if I'm to go by what the CNN business indicated in May, 29 more countries are expected to actually default. So what happens now if, say, that number increases and more people default?
Well, you're going to look at the debt crisis. There's no way of sugarcoating it, which is why you hear the IMF in their last annual meetings are talking about trying to set up a new framework for dealing with default and debt distress, especially for countries like Zambia.
Okay, so we're looking at the second largest copper producer on the continent. In terms of potential to be a powerhouse, Zambia has it. But then we're looking at a situation that could essentially crumble the country, whereby they will be looking at unbelievable rates of inflation, where we'll be looking at almost total devaluing of their currency, and we're watching it happen. In terms of rescue, is there anything possible? If we're looking at the African continent alone, is anything possible?
I mean, on paper, yes. It's entirely possible for some other country to step in and say, hey, here's we can work out some sort of arrangement where we give you some breathing room. So we perhaps provide that if it's just servicing the interest, it's $42.5 million. That's not exactly a lot of money for some of the countries in the neighborhood. Problem is, a lot of those countries that could potentially step in are also facing their own issues.
Yeah.
On paper, you could say South Africa could step in and help, but then the question becomes, okay, that helps why? They've got their own issues to deal with. So, on paper, a lot of these things can be done, but just even looking at the history that we have on a continent that we're trying to solve our own problems by ourselves, we tend to respond when the crisis has already hit, not before.
Right.
So if there is likely a response from African central bankers, from African finance ministers, at best, I think it's going to be after someone has already gone down. Because until that point, the thing is, this is 2020. HIPIC is, when HIPIC 1 happened, I was in high school. Right? So for a lot of us, it's this bizarre thing that, no one's ever really had to deal with in our lifetime. Even policymakers that are around today might have had to deal with our last structural adjustment programs in the 90s.
Yeah.
In primary school back then. But that institutional memory that, hey, if you screw around with debt service, it'll come back and bite you hard. That institutional memory seems to not be there. And that's fundamentally problematic because it means that we are now behaving in such an indisciplined manner when we go out there, borrow this money, come back and do virtually nothing with it.
Are you seeing our government, for example, is taking lessons from what's happening in Zambia, from what's happened in other African countries or in other parts of the world? Are those lessons sinking in at our national treasury?
Yes and no. What we know is that Treasury has been working, or rather talking to bilateral creditors for most of this year, trying to either restructure some of the debts that we have on a bilateral basis. So this is separate from the G20 Debt Service Initiative. But to date, we haven't seen anything concrete coming out of those talks just so far. If you go back to 2015, I remember it was probably either his first or his second press conference, the central bank governor said something pretty interesting because he gave this analogy where monetary policy basically has its foot on the gas. Has its foot on the brake. And fiscal policy, so the guys at Treasury, have the foot on the gas. Then they just want to spend. Right? And usually what you want is a situation where these two elements are working together. And at that point in time, they're in complete opposition. And this is when he came in his first time as governor. And he recognized the problem from day one. Which is why if you look at some of the comments he's been making over MPC press conferences over the years, he's consistently been on message saying, look, you can't just borrow your way out of a crisis. So there are bits of government that do recognize that there's a problem and they're working on it, but there's still a lot more stuff that we can do. So for instance, transparency is one of the key concerns that keeps emerging in all of these conversations we're having. And we're not doing particularly well on that. So if it's a question of saying this is our debt register, this is who we owe money, this is what we borrowed, on what terms, this is the price of the debt. And in the event that we default, here's what's happened, and these are all the contracts that we signed.
That transparency is not something that's forthcoming. Ramanyang, business journalist with Bloomberg and CGTN, that's China Global Television Network. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Eric.
Asante sana and have a good day. Time for us to take a break right here in the Situation Room on Spice FM. It's 9:45. Let's see what's happening on the roads. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life. Spice up your life. Traffic.
Okay, so Lusaka Road seems to be the problem and it's doing a disservice to Jogo Road this morning. Everybody is at a standstill today. The flooding that has taken place there is the issue. All right, and so now that's stopping traffic. And we now know the problem at the Maimahu route. Sand harvesters are battling with police and they've set tires in the road and those are burning at the moment. So there's a standoff between the harvesters and the police and they've decided that they're going to stop traffic on the road. And that's why we have these kilometers of traffic as you're heading out of the city. And that is still going on as we speak. All right, so there's a problem there. Landis Road, however, as you come back into the city is clear. The traffic police at City Stadium have moved the roundabout and they've sorted out that issue, so you're good to go in that area. Mombasa Road, however, that's not a place that you want to play with right now. Still moving very slowly. Uhuru Highway also into the CBD and then on towards Westlands. That is moving very slowly as well. So today has not been a good day for traffic. Jogo Road is still absolute madness. Those are the places to watch outside of the city with the standoff between police and harvesters and a lot of fire and explosions on the road, so you don't want to go there right now. We'll let you know through the day what it looks like. You let us know too. Spice FMKE on Twitter or text on 40127.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
So 071901. There's debt. There's the issue of counties trying to work out how they can recover from the effects of COVID-19. There's basically lack of clarity on very many fronts.
Even when you have people coming together, they're really coming together. Everybody's trying to sort out their own issue. I heard Professor Nyangongo refer to, in my county of Kisumu, this is what's happening. And we listened to Rama speak just now. And, it's okay, well, South Africa could help out Zambia. But I have my own issues that I need to sort out. The African Union maybe could come and say, okay, look, what are we going to do financially for this country? The seat of the African Union, as we speak, is on fire now with the things going on in Ethiopia. So you want to ask yourself the question, who's going to help? And with the original idea where countries should have come together or should come together to say, can we help out one of our own?
Why should we do that?
That's why should we?
But
What kind of collective help?
Why wait until it gets
to the point?
And the question here is being asked both to the person who borrowed and the person who lent the money. You can see what's happening. And because of COVID, it's certainly not going to stop with that one country.
Sure. If you as an individual went to borrow money from the bank today, what is one of the things they do? They do their due diligence to find out if you owe somewhere else and what level you owe at, and if you've been able to pay or not pay. And it's upon that information that they then extend the service to you.
They may not get all the information.
Sure, but they would have an indication of what the situation is.
What you give them.
I find it very difficult to believe that, for example, this Eurobond 2024 offer for Zambia came and they had no idea the state that the country was in. I find
it's
it
not
difficult.
even that. I mean, COVID turned everything topsy-turvy. I mean, it's and many countries are also going to default. So surely if you are the lender, should you not
just pause
and say, hold on
ask,
a minute.
okay, do you want, what
you guys did? What
the
do
usual
you
thing,
need?
okay, what can you pay? Because you keep insisting on paying what they promised to pay. They can't.
They will not pay.
They
That's
will
obvious.
not.
They can't.
You'll be
They won't.
So they will default.
Let's go to the phone lines. 0719-012-600. Mohammed.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you. How are you?
I'm well. Wangwana, salamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, kaka.
Salam.
Mazungumzo mazuri, mazito, full of content and substance.
Asante.
Very good English, the Queen's language. Even the accent is very good.
Asante.
I really appreciate that. But the way my mzee mwalimu wanatumia hiyo but we never walk the talk. We always sleep the talk. Either we sit the talk. The maximum we do, we just crawl the talk. We rarely walk the talk.
The talk.
Yes.
What are you saying?
You involved, myself and you also. We are all involved. Yeah. We rarely walk the talk. We just do no theory. Practical hatujui.
Mambo mengi.
You hatuna lab.
But why do you say this, Mohammed? Why today? Why did you choose today to talk about walking the talk?
Because every day I hear very good talks, very talks with content, talks with substance, conversation I enjoy listening to. But at the end of the day, it goes along the drain, inapotea. Even katiba yetu ni hiyo tu. Proposals zetu ni hivyo tu.
Kaka Mohammed, what makes you think it goes down the drain?
Our behavior, we behave abnormally. In fact, I requested that we bring an expert on human behavior. You know, there was people studied baboons' behavior, people studied the smile behavior, the flashing, the yawning. All these are being studied and researched, and we come out with the results. But his behavior to behave abnormally, natafuta expert aje atuzungumzie. Why do we behave abnormally?
But
for example,
please go ahead.
For example, you know, leadership is pulling the rope, not pushing the rope. Everyone knows that. Let's take for granted this COVID thing here. Our leaders, our politicians instruct us and instruct the police and all those what have you to tackle the COVID on one side. On the other side, they make the big gatherings. They forget that there's COVID. That is pushing. They're not pulling the crowd. So this is the type of we don't walk the talk. Our loans, our debts, our Professor Anyang' Nyong'o was there. He tells you about emergency. Alafu, you don't compare with others. Compare yourself mwanzo. Do what you can do at home. Wewe usiende ukazima nyumba jirani moto na waka na yako inawaka. That's not the way. A leader should not talk that way.
Kweli kabisa.
Kwa hivyo, hata hiyo COVID pia, sorry, I will use the word warthog, aungiri Kiswahili, anasahau haraka. The other day nimezungumza nyingi kuhusu mambo ya COVID, hata mwalimu akaniunga mkono mara kadhaa. Lakini whenever there is a guest or an expert coming to talk on COVID, those issues of how to tackle them, which I contribute, they are never being mentioned. Today, UK is providing vitamin D supplements to their population so that they can fight back or they can boost their immune system to fight back COVID. But homegrown ideas like Mwakijembe, Mohammed from Mwakijembe comes up with the idea, nobody will listen to him.
Such as what,
but
for example, Mohammed, if I gave you the charge today and said, all right, here you are, this is an example of an idea, let's say public participation was taking place at county level, okay? And so here is an idea that you can bring forward, and we're ready to hear from Kenyans. Help us out as national government because our heads have hit the wall, we don't know what to do. What would be one of those things that you would suggest that was well within their, ability to do?
You know, to attend such forums, when you know where Mwakijembe, please may you do the Google map and see where Mwakijembe
Let's
is.
just
Number
say,
one.
okay, let's say it
Number
came
two,
to
I'm
you.
using the forum of the media. Like
okay, so tell me one example of what that would be.
To do what?
You're talking about, I have an idea and nobody's here to listen to me. What would be one of those ways in which you would help?
This COVID issue, since March, the day one when it started, I always talk on radio stations regarding boosting the immune system. No one wants to listen to that. They always come up with other ideas. This is the basic. Primarily, you have to tackle it with the immune system. Then secondarily, go to the... Yeah, that's the thing I'm talking every day since March. Up to now, we are in November.
Actually,
nobody's listening. Even
Mohammed,
in fact, I'm challenging experts to come and prove me wrong.
Mohammed,
No
you're
one has come.
right, and there are very many experts who even come out and spoken about it. Even the Ministry of Health itself
CS Rashid Ahmed says it all the time.
keeps talking about, let's boost our immunity, let's exercise, let's find it in our diet, in what we are doing. And even other people who call on the show, even after you've called, they talk the same thing. We talk about the same thing every day. So don't tire with the message. Ujumbe lazima uendelee kusambaza.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Eric. Sorry for interrupting you.
Endelea, Mohamed.
Naona hii mambo ya effort na bidii na wakati inatumika kuhimiza sanitization na borokoa, distance, social distance, kuosha maguu, kuosha kichwa, kuosha nini.
Kushika watu.
Ile effort imetumika hapo. If I wish umetumia 10% of that effort kusensitize wananchi.
I totally agree.
I agree actually.
Kuboost immune system yako. Tungepiga stride moja kubwa sana.
Completely.
And it's very cheap. Very cheap.
True.
Yeah, but even if you do a research of those who are unfortunately succumb to COVID, see their lifestyle.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say maybe they use a lot of junk food. Sorry to use the word junk food. But if mimi na wewe tunakula sukuma wiki daily na tunakula dagaa, na saa yote tuko juani, tunalima shamba, tunaenda kwa mjengo, we walk around, you hardly hear those people of that type succumbing to that problem. The affluent, those who they don't see, they can't even wash a spoon. The sun will never hit them on their face. Where do you expect to get a strong immune system to fight back?
I think this is a strong message, honestly. I think so. I think it's something that everybody needs to hear and practice. At the same time, Mohammed, just like Eric said, it's something we have to keep saying. We have to keep talking about it. We can't stop.
I feel as if I'm bothering you. I'm coming
It's not a bother. It's not a bother. You shouldn't stop.
There's that word that I miss out. I'll keep on talking. Since March, I've been talking the same. Any radio station I get a chance to talk, I preach the same thing.
Yes.
Primarily, we do this, but we shouldn't forget about sanitizing, about borokoa, about all those measures being advised by the ministry. I don't refute that. I support it, but that is a secondary issue. The primary issue is boost your immune system.
True.
Hiyo ndio muhimu.
Asante sana, Mohammed.
Alafu, let me tell you, in a nutshell, the only thing which will set you free, my dear friends, is truth. Across the board. Be it media, be it politician, be it you individual, me, you, him. The only thing which will set us free is truth. But we are very stingy and mean in truth. That is why we are having all these problems. Thank you, sir. Wish you a very good day and a blessed one.
Mohammed Asante.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Asante,
you.
Mohammed. It's good points that he keeps raising, and we cannot really stop talking about it. When you talk about COVID, we've got to talk about all the measures that everybody needs to take, and it starts from there.
Sure, but I think those are the powers that lie in conversation.
Yes.
The powers that lie in continue repeat, because you don't know how you're affecting somebody else who may be listening constantly. And people will pick it up.
Siti Muga, as we come to the end of today's show, let's learn about gold trade.
A thing of value. And those who value it. Essentially, there are those who subscribe their faith to the Bible, and they will quote a certain reference to it. Don't cast pearls among swine. A thing of value again. Meaning, whatever it is, and talking about Muhammad and what we are saying, we are not selling this particular gold, because that's the gold here is a piece of advice for people who don't listen. No. What we are saying is fighting against other information that people already have, but the value of what he said is not diminished. But there are those who will hear it and will take it for what it is. And even if it's just one person, it's progress.
Kweli kabisa.
1 from 0.
Kweli kabisa. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Join us again tomorrow. And do, of course, say goodbye and what's going to come throughout the day until tomorrow morning.
Well, let's see. Uninterrupted music between now and 3 p.m. The Spice Drive then takes over until 7, taking you home with great music, great competitions, And then the adults in the room come in from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And then hours after that, you will enjoy more music. And then we will be back at 6 a.m.
Sawa sawa. Have a good day. It's now 10 o'clock.